let's get the Nantucket Conservation meeting going here for Wednesday, March 29th. We start with, first of all, we're recording this meeting, and everybody is doing so as well. Please let us know. And please, if you could silence your cell phones up here, highly appreciated. So the first part is the public meeting. Anybody have comments or anything they'd like to discuss, items that are not being heard tonight? Okay. Seeing not, we're going to go into the public meeting, public hearing. Start with, we have two continuances in the amended orders of conditions. Nantucket 62 Wall Street LLC at 62 Wall Street and 64 Wall Street LLC at 64 Wall Street, Lot 2, are both continued till April 12th.
We have one more, too.
Oh.
It just got in late. And then the Nantucket Islands Land Bank would also like to continue to the 12th.
Okay, and Nantucket Island Land Bank at 16 East Creek Road would like to continue to the 12th as well. That's good. Okay, so we're going to start with Holland Jr., 66 Chestnut Street.
So real quick, Mr. Chairman, for the record, this one that was continued without opening last time. And Commissioners Topham and Shampoo have read back in compliance with the Mullen Rule and have signed their certifications as such, and are fully eligible to participate. So everybody's awesome.
Good afternoon, Mark Ritz from Site Design, here with Dan Malloy representing the applicants at 66 Westchester. Just to give everybody a quick summary of what this project is all about. We're proposing to relocate an existing municipal drain line that currently runs across a portion of our property, goes onto an abutting property, and then terminates below the water level out in the wetland. We want to reroute the pipe on our property, terminating just outside of the wetland with a riprap apron just outside the wetland and inside the 25-foot buffer zone. We're also looking to construct a pool located partially inside the 100-foot buffer, a pool cabana located inside the 100-foot buffer, a few minor additions on the existing house inside the 100-foot buffer, and with the exception of portions of the proposed drain line, all of the work is outside the 50-foot buffer. The pool, portions of the pool will be within 2 feet of high groundwater and within high groundwater, so we're requesting a waiver for the pool, for the 2-foot groundwater separation. And we're also requesting a waiver for the work inside the 25-foot and 50-foot buffers for the drain line and the discharge. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner comments? Questions?
So I was listening into this project. I get it. I see where you guys are coming from as far as you need the pitch on the pipe at point A to point B. You've got very little pitch in this pipe, relatively flat. But I was thinking at the road grate, the storm drain at the road. Does that thing sit by itself, or is that tied into a bigger system?
The road it's tied to the drainage system in the road.
Okay.
And it's as high as it can go.
It's as high as it can go. Okay.
Can't go any higher without the structure not fitting in the structure. So.
Got it. Yeah. All right. So I was thinking if it was sitting alone, you could adjust the height there and potentially get some more height on the pipe because you're going to be raising the grade. Is there any possibility of using this as like a, when the water level gets high enough, it reaches this pipe and goes out to the wetland? In other words, you have your lower pipe that runs kind of in a day-to-day situation, and then an overflow pipe that runs into this wetland in the biggest of storms that's maybe set up in that storm drain.
Yeah, there isn't
or anything like that.
Right now, the crown of the pipe right now is only a foot below the grate.
Is it?
So we can't pick it up any higher, or else it won't physically fit in the
Is it?
structure. So
Yeah.
there's no more room.
No.
Have you done the same thing on your manholes that are in the yard?
Yes, we're keeping everything as high as
So yeah, keep it way up there, okay.
The pipe is running in a minimum slope just so we can get it out there.
Yeah. know, for me in listening in, I'll say that I didn't really see that there was much improvement that could be made on the pipe flowing. The outlet was right at high water level, right? The outlet of the pipe is basically.
Well, the pipe now comes out right around here,
Yeah.
and it's physically in the wetland below the water
Below the
elevation.
water, okay, so it's not draining at
So
all.
it's not draining at all.
Or it drains when it's dry.
It drains very slowly, so the street backs up and flows.
I know you explored some in this revision. There was some exploration of some planting around the outlet. I feel like it's going to be hard for us to get anything to grow there under normal conditions. But what do you have proposed? Sedges, rushes, something
There's
like that?
sedges, rushes, I guess, hardwood,
Yeah, yes, Highbush blueberry and get what else was listed in the,
We've got buffer zone plantings, we're replanting the entire
Yeah.
buffer zone area there, so we'll have some of it there, but just isn't enough room. The big question was, could we pull it back to
Yeah.
the wetland and put more in front of it?
Yeah.
And
they
that-
put something in front of it and
But as you're pulling it back, you're basically creating the situation where the water isn't coming out from the wetland and the wetland getting bigger towards the
Right,
right.
there's no, there just isn't enough elevation to scale it back to put in anything in front.
Right.
That's the problem.
Do you have information about when, I'm assuming it was the DPW, put in the original pipe and what that pipe was sized, like what sort of storm drainage area that pipe was sized for? I just feel like that's important when we're saying there's no negative impacts of this. If it was sized at a different time for a different amount of water, there's been a lot of development on this street, including paving a lot of it. So it's certainly different impacts to the wetland system than that original pipe would have been.
There's no records that we have seen that ever determined the old size of the pipe. Historically, how things were done, pipe was just put in. That's what they had, that's what they put in. I wouldn't expect you ever to see a calculation that said, we use this size pipe for this reason. In other town projects, other town files, history-wise, I've never seen that, honestly, on any project that the town ever undertook on this level years ago.
Okay. Do we have information from the DPW as far as their maintenance plan of the end of this pipe?
I've talked to DPW, their maintenance, well, maintenance for the whole system is the same as the rest of their drainage system now. They come out, they clean catch basins once a year. When they clean the basins, they inspect the line and also inspect the outfall, which would be riprap at this point. It's the same maintenance schedule as everywhere, and if anything needs to be done at that time, they do, whether it's taking out weeds, cutting the weeds down, cleaning out sediment, whatever's there, that's their program. So it'd be an annual review, and one more review if needed. So if there's a problem, obviously, we'll be out there more often. But that's their schedule.
Okay, I guess I'd just like to see something to that effect in the file so that we know that this isn't just set it and forget it behind the pool fence, that we actually do have a maintenance protocol for this. Because I do think it's going to be taking more sediment, more contaminants from the road than the current pipe is depositing into this wetland.
All we can provide you is what I know this DPW is scheduled to be. I don't know that that exists physically in writing someplace that I can give you. I don't know that that's the case. I know that's their protocol, that's how they do it. I've talked to them about it, but I don't have it in writing. I don't know if they have it. I don't know if they have such a program in writing in place. That's just how they do it.
You were gonna put a sediment trap in that one manhole too, weren't you?
It's,
At least a
yes, the
sediment trap?
first manhole on site, we did put a sediment trap in that one, so we are improving on there's nothing now, so at least improving on that situation.
Could it be said that the lack of maintenance on this would protect the wetlands?
Well,
I mean, plug the pipe up?
Yeah.
the water's going to get there
If the
regardless.
DPW doesn't take care of it, they're not gonna get it.
The water's still getting in the wetland.
Right.
very slowly.
It's getting there slower, but in turn, it's flooding the street.
No, I understand,
So
yeah.
it's
But the street is unfortunately not within our purview. So the flood in the street, you know, it's what's discharging out of the end of this pipe.
So what we're looking at is a situation where the water goes in the wetland now. We're not changing where it goes. We're trying to make it flow better so we can alleviate a flooding problem in the street. We have a safety problem in the street versus a stormwater discharge. That's what we're looking at.
What if this was just a hypothetical? What if this was a new development? How would this be handled? Obviously, the HRI wouldn't be running the pipe across this private
Well, for a
property.
brand new, things would be elevated higher.
Yeah.
If this were a new street, Westchester Street didn't
Yeah,
exist.
you wouldn't have the
We
drain
wouldn't-
at the elevation it's at.
Right, would have elevations to work with. We can't raise Westchester Street and change that if it exists, so that's,
Would the outflow be allowed into the system in today's?
if it were a new project from the start,
Yeah.
not without some type of hardship, no. So,
So,
you know, pre-existing condition, yes, but
Yeah.
then start from scratch, you have to have some reason.
This pipe isn't providing any drainage benefit to our property or our project.
yeah, I know.
So this is strictly for flooding in the street, and we're just voluntarily rerunning it on our lot and cleaning it up. This isn't doing anything with any of our stormwater.
And if this was a DPW project, we might be looking upstream on, you know, could they shunt some of that water off into drainage basins or something up this
Right.
road a ways, but since it's not a DPW project,
I think if you looked, you probably wouldn't find much else.
you know.
Knowing the
pretty
neighborhood,
flat.
I mean, we've done other projects here, I know you've seen dozens of projects on Westchester Street. This is, there isn't much out there to work with. I mean, I know you've seen plenty of them come through here with broken pipes, problems, and all kinds. There just isn't anything out there to work with.
The town has no plans for anything on this.
Well, is
I bet
no
if there was
water in
push
the-
from street
necessarily a bad
homeowners to the
thing.
town that direction,
Yeah,
they would
no,
be
I
more
mean,
likely to
well,
do
maybe the
something.
wetland isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on, I think the big component of this is trying to get some sediment trapped, which I think these guys have.
Yeah, can't take care of it. Water's gonna end up there anyways.
Right.
But it'll
happen quickly.
infiltrate somewhat on the way. I mean, this is really direct discharge from a pipe. That makes me nervous under stipulations that the DPW is just gonna come in once a year and check it out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Ashley.
Yeah.
If the DPW lets it clog up, it's gonna be, it'll probably help.
Well, then it might flood the road
Yeah,
again.
it's
It'll
gonna flood
just
the road.
again, you know.
Could there be a perk pipe in a gravel bed buried with that?
It wouldn't help here, the groundwater's too high. It's not, I mean, groundwater in some of these situations only, I think it's a few feet below grade, it's not.
It's just, you know, I think the hesitation's coming, I guess, where we're seeing this like direct 12-inch pipe from the road, you know.
I think what
Who
it
knows
is,
what's
remember,
happening.
it's, right now it's in the way. It's
Right.
physically in the way,
Yeah.
with no treatment, no nothing, it's just,
Just direct flow.
It's
It's just
just-
not flowing like a 12-inch pipe. Sorry, this is gonna have some pretty good.
well, it was
flow.
also just maintained, so now it is flowing. It
Yeah.
was clogged, so that's why we've gone out there, they found the end of the pipe.
Mhm.
It's now been cleaned, so for a few years it was clogged, flooding the street. Now it's been cleaned, it is free flowing now, but albeit still below water, so not free flowing well,
Yeah.
but much better than it was.
I don't hear us coming up with ideas to make this better from the board or from, maybe the public has something, but otherwise I'd say this is what we're gonna get and we should either thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yeah.
If they're ready for that.
We don't have anything new, this is something we've, presented, it's just a question, we're just trying to answer your questions.
And they have made improvements from the original design based on our comments from that first meeting.
Right, I totally agree. Agree.
Yeah.
Well, how about, open up to the public here, any public comment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dan Bailey. I'm with the Boston law firm of Pierce Atwood LLP. I represent Jonathan Blackman, who is a direct abutter to this project. Mr. Blackman lives in New York and couldn't be here today, but he did give me a short statement, and I beg your indulgence. I told him no more than 2 pages, and he stuck to it. So if I could just read this. Mr. Bennett and members of the commission, I am Jonathan Blackman, and since 2000, I've home at 68 Westchester Street with my wife, Kathy Schuler. It is our summer house. We do not rent it out, but use it exclusively to spend time in the summer with our family and friends. I wish I could be here this evening to talk in person about why we object to the proposed pool, but a combination of work and the difficulties of getting to the island by plane at this time of year has made that impractical. I respectfully ask that you accept this statement instead. 68 Westchester, as well as 66 Westchester, abut protected wetlands. This was, in fact, one of the reasons why we bought our house at 68 Westchester over 15 years ago. At that time, the paved part of Westchester Street actually ended almost at the foot of our driveway. We like the idea that the wetlands prevented any new construction on the far side of our house. We actually own 70 Westchester, which is the unimprovable strip next to 68, and the wetlands would provide a sense of quiet and closeness to nature. We were therefore very dismayed when we heard about the proposed pool at 66. The wetlands are just that, a reservoir of water that supports a good deal of wildlife. Because of all the water, it's pretty common for there to be flooding in the spring, which washes over our property. I believe that digging the pool within the buffer zone around the wetlands will significantly disturb the water table and make the problem of flooding worse. I understand that there is a new pipe to be put in, but that will obviously not affect the disturbance of water table from the pool construction. I cannot understand, under the circumstances, why excavating in what is already a protected marshy area should be permitted, or why a waiver of the normal rules that would preclude such construction would be granted. The effect of digging out a pool would in fact be no different than digging a foundation for a new house. I doubt that the Conservation Commission would grant a waiver for a full basement in the buffer zone, and I see no reason why a pool should be treated any differently. In addition to disturbing the water table and aggravating the drainage and flooding problems that already exist, the pool would create another problem: what to do with the water. The pool would have to be chlorinated, with the result that chlorinated water would be splashing into the spongy soil around the pool all the time. On top of this, I do not know whether the intention is to drain the pool at the end of the season, but if that occurs, still more chlorine could end up in the soil along with the water itself. Even if there is no such draining, chlorine from normal pool use would constantly be leaching into the soil and inevitably migrate into the wetlands. I cannot believe that this would be good for any of the wildlife that lives there or for the health of the wetlands generally. The wetland is a delicate natural environment. That is why it is legally protected and why the Conservation Commission is charged with the duty of ensuring that protection. Digging a big hole in spongy soil and putting a structure into the buffer zone with all of the risks that I have tried to summarize will be harmful to that natural environment. I am not an expert nor engineer, but common sense tells me that a pool will not be good for the wetland that our house and 66 share, and that should be preserved for us and for future owners. There are plenty of places to swim on the island, but the wetland will be replaceable. Thank you. I'd just like to speak briefly on the waiver request. There's a request for a waiver in front of you because, as Mr. Malloy mentioned, the groundwater is pretty high in this area. I think the waiver request is twofold. It's, at least according to the NOI, it's for both the pool, which will definitely be in the groundwater, as well as for portions of new foundations that may be put in that way, maybe within 2 feet. This is exactly the type of area that you have the 2-foot separation distance for. It's a wet area. We all understand that. And, this commission is very reluctant, in my experience, to waive the 2-foot separation distance for new foundations. I don't understand why you would be more willing to do it for a pool. As you well know, there's a 2-part test for waivers. One is no adverse impact on the environment, and the other is that there's no reasonable alternative. In this particular case, Mr. Malloy has provided you with an alternatives analysis, but that alternatives analysis just basically says, well, this is really the only place on the site that the pool can be located. And he might be right about that. But what he hasn't looked at is, this is a 14-foot by 32-foot pool. It's a pretty big pool on a relatively small lot. One thing you could look at that would reduce the displacement, groundwater displacement, would be a smaller pool. Another thing that you could look at that would reduce the groundwater displacement would be a shallow pool. The top of the pool is at 17 feet here. The bottom of the pool, the top of high groundwater is at about 12. So you've got about 5 feet to work with there. So if you didn't have a deep end, then they might be able to get around or have a lesser waiver. The other question I have, I didn't see it in the paperwork, and I'm sure Dan has this, but I just want to know how high groundwater was measured, whether it was a test pit or whatever the means for doing it. So in any event, I would encourage the commission to enforce its regulations. You have them for a reason. I know I've stood many times in front of this commission and tried to argue why you should grant waivers, not very successfully. And this time I would encourage you to enforce it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions?
I just answered one of the questions for you. The groundwater determination with a test pit on site, and we observed, physically observed water as well as modeling in the soil. So that's how it's, that information is on the plan.
What was that depth, Dan?
So 12-foot groundwater elevation.
3 feet, so it's elevation 12, wetlands are on elevation 11. It makes sense where it is.
Any questions? Any more questions from the public? Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
All the required information is in, yes.
Are you ready to close for this meeting?
Yes.
Someone like to make that motion?
Move to close. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Nantucket Community Sailing to Bathing Beach Road.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, along with Diana Brown, we're before you tonight with a notice of intent application related to community sailing. And the plan that's in front of you represents a portion of the beach, on Jetty's Beach, which would be on the east side. I had included a locus map and some aerial photographs that should be in your packet, so that you can get a sense, I think, of right where we're talking about. But basically, opposite of the Concom office, down one of the paths that run down to the beach, there is an area that community sailing has a lease with the town to operate their service, I guess I would call it, to the public down there. And there are a few sheds which have been used for part of the operation in the past, and they're now looking to replace those sheds. They're seasonally used, and they're having them rebuilt. We want to obtain the proper permits to have those sheds on the beach. We're located within coastal beach area. On the other side, we traverse the dune or the beach to get the sheds here. There are some questions from Natural Heritage, so ultimately we will be requesting a continuance tonight. I provided a response to them, which was also to you, but we hadn't received an answer to that back tonight. I did want to go forward tonight, though, so that if there were any questions or information that the commission wanted, that we'd be able to address that as well. The sheds would, again, be on skids that are put on wheels and rolled out into their location and taken in and out seasonally. The exact location along the beach of where they go has been determined typically in conjunction with your director, and we've proposed a condition that would also remain to be true on a seasonal basis, that the exact location of where the sheds are placed would be determined in conjunction with the Natural Resources Director. The sheds are really necessary for the operation for a safety perspective, that there is supervisors that are able to watch out on the water sheet and be able to respond if need be in a very timely basis. There were some questions about the storage of the boats, which I've addressed in the correspondence back to you, but just to run over that quickly. Some of the smallest boats and kayaks are actually stored in the sheds. Some of the small boats would be stored on the beach, not on vegetated areas adjacent to the shed. And a majority of the boats associated with community sailing are actually in the mooring field. And so they use the kayaks, paddle boards, other small boats to get to those boats. And like we say, we believe that it's been a long-standing practice, and we're just seeking to obtain an order of conditions given it's 3 new sheds, and we included architectural drawings in the application as well. And I would be happy to address any questions or concerns, and Diana is here as well. Probably could better address some of them than I could.
What do you use to haul the sheds back and forth? Do you have a vehicle that you pull them with, or?
Well, our old sheds, we used to use a forklift, but with the new sheds, with the way the track system is built under them, we would just pull them with a truck.
Around the point.
Around the point.
Yeah.
We would use Jeff's guidance on which path to use, but that's probably the best way to go.
What, it looks like some of the old sheds were maybe sitting on cinder blocks. Would these do the same? Or are they just
They'll be on the
big
skids,
places?
right? So
Okay.
that now the new sheds are gonna have a skid that's
Unlike the
constructed
tracks.
underneath them, and that's what the wheel dolly assembly would also sit on. So it eliminates that need. You'll have to rake out a little area, level it, again, seasonally.
2 of the old sheds were on cinder blocks. The third one was permanently on the beach until it got destroyed by a storm.
Okay, thank you.
So all 3 of the new ones are removable.
Do you have ways of sort of keeping the kids out of the dunes and stuff like that as best as you can? I mean, I know they're right up against on the. It seems like
People
they're-
tend to follow the paths
Yeah.
and stay in the pathway, so that hasn't really been a problem. And because the paths are the shortest distance to the water, I think they stay out of the dunes. We also we're very conscientious about picking up every single day. So in addition to the general public and the members who use our site, a lot of the general public uses that beach just because it's a very shallow, calm beach, so it's great for little kids. And so we pick up after everybody every day. But the playground is right on the other side, so most people either come through that one path or through the playground path to get to the dunes. And we really haven't seen people walking through the dunes.
So, the fibergrate boardwalk, is that going to have railings? Or is
It's
it,
only temporary while we're moving the sheds.
okay.
It is flat on top
The,
of the
the
sand.
boardwalk replacement? That you have here in the letter from March 24th, the boardwalk.
On the wrong filing.
Wrong filing?
Oh,
That's the
good.
one we're filing.
Oh, now we're talking.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
God,
No
lady.
boardwalk.
Design.
We'll get to that, I promise.
It may be. That'll be that one. That's all right. It may be in the wrong spot in the packet.
Well, there's a little scattering of projects.
No, I think you just went one page too far, but.
Jeff?
Yes.
Do plumbers ever get down into this area, or does
So-
the public keep them back up?
So
to
one of
the-
the, oh yeah, we had a letter get in the wrong spot in the packet. Sorry about that. So one of the reasons why when they came to talk about this project, we talked about being flexible, and one of the reasons why we do it is the area in front of the restaurant, and then if you look at the aerial photographs, you see the other large sandy patch that's there, have been areas where there have historically been nesting plovers. And one of the reasons why we kind of evaluated it on a year-to-year basis, and we're a little flexible, was to try to maximize that distance from birds that actually nest. A lot of times the sheds have gone on kind of after plovers have set up territories, and then we escorted the tractor on and set it down, and then escorted it off and went through that whole procedure. The thought being, if they're more mobile, you can maximize that distance and select better spots to access the beach to avoid as much interaction as possible with the birds. So you can hedge one way or the other for entering and leaving, and also hedge one way or the other based upon where birds are utilizing that area. So that was kind of after a lot of discussion with Art, especially where this kind of came from. So there are birds that are there, but it's also, you know, one of the few spots where it's also the most public beach, maybe on the island behind Surfside for daily attendees, that have the most successful birds on the island. It's weird.
Ironies of.
Yeah, it's, you know, they're birds that run across beach towels that fledge 4 chicks a year, whether they try or not. They're pretty remarkable, but was kind of the thought when they came in to say we need to replace our sheds and we wanted to provide, you know, less impact. You know, how do we brainstorm that? And that's kind of what the genesis of the 3 movable sheds and coming off from the different spots was, to try to, you know, it wasn't to try to let them move around down the dune line. It was to try to maximize the distance from the birds and try to get 2 competing uses to coexist.
Well, if the birds have, you know, they've managed so far, so.
Yeah. Natural Heritage may think otherwise.
Yeah, well, so
Get
the
there,
heritage
but,
says, yeah,
um,
they're
I mean, that's traditionally how jetties has been managed. It's been managed at a very, for plovers at least, a very recreation-friendly plover site. It's not like, to compare, it's not like going out to Eel Point or Smith's Point where it's hard to get to when it's not there. I mean, this is in town, and the Nerva stops there, and there's a restaurant.
Sail.
It's not, yeah, it's not a normal spot for the birds. But at the same time, it's the last 10 years, it's our highest chicks per pair than any of our other sites.
Go figure.
No.
There's
There's some
other
theories
places
behind
up
that, but
north that are like that. I think Revere Beach is.
Revere
a place
Beach is-
that
yeah.
is similar, very heavily used, but successful plovers.
Well, there's some thought that the heavy use of the beach areas, especially off island, cuts down on the number of active predators that are in the area, so their rates of predation by, especially mammalian predators, go way down. I've never seen a nest during the season predated. Our nests that we lose at jetties get predated usually before the first week of June, before that beach starts to get populated. To be honest, it's usually a cat, but
Perhaps it's the diet of hot dogs.
it could be. I mean, that's the thing is you just don't see a lot of gull activity where they're really heavily foraging or looking around. I mean, I hate to say it, but they pick at trash.
Yeah,
Are
they have
pretty
enough
happy to do
lunch
so.
bags.
Yeah.
Blend your food.
So
Easier to find.
yeah. It's an interesting site. It's not a. I mean, I'm not saying it's how you should be managing for plovers, but in a site like this, it seems to work.
Other questions? Questions from the public? So,
We'd like a continuance for 2 weeks, and hopefully we have a response from Natural Heritage to the supplemental information we provided to them, which is really adding some water lines and establishing some elevations and clarifying some of the things that we clarified for you. And it was the same correspondence. I actually addressed it to you and CC'd them.
we will continue for 2 weeks. Unless,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Art.
Battisti, 10 Alexandria Road.
My name is Jeff Blackwell for the applicant. Christina Battisti is the purchaser of this property, which is still owned by Conway and Traub. The proposal is for a single-family dwelling to be constructed within the buffer zone and also associated landscaping. The landscaping and structure are well beyond the minimum setbacks of 25 feet and 50 feet, and no waivers are requested. The new dwelling will be connected to town sewer and town water. And, fairly straightforward application.
Is this existing yard?
No, the current owners have constructed a lumber rack and a hoop tent on a wooden deck. Those features are pointed out, but those will disappear. There's no formal landscaping or development of the property.
Any questions?
So Jeff, everything's pretty far outside the 50 that I'm seeing?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. This is the-
Any questions?
So I'll just say for the record, Laura Tide and our office both confirm that wetland line is correct.
Questions from the public? Jeff, we already do need to close?
We do.
Jeff, you like to close?
Yes, please.
Motion? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lucas, 147 Walnut Road.
So the beginning of this is makes it kind of, right?
The one that got mixed up, I think is 135 Walnut.
Oh, 135.
Easter egg
Checked it. It was correct. I actually put computers. Makes it.
I'm constantly trying to check them.
Oh, this is back.
That's the one.
Whatever it is.
Jeff Blackwell for the owners. The existing septic system was failed due to groundwater offset nonconformity recently, and the owner would ask us to prepare a new septic system design. Because the property is in the Harbor Watershed District, the new septic system will incorporate denitrifying alternative technology and propose to put in a new leach field at a higher elevation and a little further away from Nantucket Harbor, so that the groundwater separation will now approach 8 feet. The failed system, the groundwater separation is something less than 4 feet. So we looked for the area that was least stable in terms of vegetation, and that is the area that's just west of the existing system. So the proposal for the work is all, for the leach field is in that area, and then the new tanks will be just west of the house. So the area will be revegetated with American beach grass after the installation is complete, and there's no mounding or alteration of the grade otherwise proposed.
Question?
How does the denitrifying system work?
This is a Septitech system that we're proposing. I wish I could describe to you the biological process precisely, but it's complicated. There's a media in the tank, and through a series of pumps and a control logic board, the media is sprayed with effluent periodically, and there's a recycling element to it. So the end result is suspended solids, VODs, and nitrogen is reduced throughout the process. Beyond that, I'd have to get you the accompanying literature to do any better than that.
Do they convert the nitrogen, the nitrate and stuff into nitrogen 2, N2 gas? To get rid of it, or is it tied up in the biomass in
I
there?
believe it's converted to gas, but I would have to, I'd have to.
That would be
look into
ideal,
that.
otherwise it's just still stuck there somehow,
Yeah.
so it's gotta escape, and that would be the best way, is N2.
I believe that's the process, but I have to confirm that for you.
Well, you don't want nitrogen, and that's just nitrogen gas.
Yeah,
The
that's-
the atmospheric nitrogen is N2. You don't want NO, or that's a real bad greenhouse gas.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't
But it's a
get
denitrification.
nitrous oxide. Well, they are oxygenating these systems,
Yeah.
right, to help feed the microbes, so you might get NO. Did you look at like a tight tank in this area or an alternative like that?
No, we did not. My sense of tight tanks is they require continual human intervention to empty them. And even though there is some human involvement in the annual maintenance of this sort of a system, it's much less than that of having a tight tank. And I think the philosophy of DEP is generally, you take, in many realms, the more you can remove the human element to the function of the system, the better. So, no, we didn't look into a tight tank here.
I'll hop in a little bit because we've looked a lot into tight tanks lately. Tight tanks are generally viewed as by DEP as a system of last resort. So it's if you can't get any kind of traditional or conventional system in, then and only then do tight tanks kind of become an option. But again, they discourage to the very end the use of tight tanks if they can, for various different reasons. But that's how they view it. And if you can fit a Title V compliant system on a lot, I've never seen them grant.
Do they do that to discourage development, or is that the same attitude towards secondary?
It's a maintenance. I mean, one of the things that they also include with any tight tank is they typically require a kind of a seasonal use deed restriction to go on, because they don't want year-round residences operating on tight tanks because they're just exceedingly difficult to maintain. I mean, if you think that the design flow for a regular house is, kind of 110 gallons per bedroom per day, and if you have a 2,000-gallon septic tank, and you have a 4-bedroom house, how fast you're going to be filling up that tight tank, and just how much you're going to be pumping and that amount of activity to do it, they try to limit it to some degree. And I think that's one of the reasons is they are just a maintenance headache to deal with, and they don't want, tanks backing up or failing or having issues. So I think that's why it's literally if you run out of all other options, tight tanks.
So is this leach field outside of all the 100-foot wetland buffers and stuff then?
Well, this is a barrier beach,
Okay, it's a beach, but yeah,
and it's
that's,
in a dune field, but there's no isolated or bordering vegetated wetlands.
So these are ones, this is when we talk about the interest protected, that we have something like groundwater protection and surface water protection. Typically your vegetated wetlands and your ones that actually involve water are the ones that are involved with those. Typically dunes are not providing that interest. So they are viewed differently by Title V. That you obviously couldn't put a leach field into a swamp. You have groundwater issues and all that.
it seems like we've been, encouraging these types of systems out in that area in general.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys remember, I know not everyone was on the board for the one at 137 or 139, the Row property, at the time. I think that's the correct number. They spent about a year and a half doing a groundwater analysis to determine whether the flow was going to the harbor or to the ocean. And after spending all of that time where determined that they were unable to determine it, and they ended up with an IA system because, you know, we typically err on the side of protecting the harbor, just in case, and that's, since that point, most of these houses out here have all been converting to IA systems.
Yes, this does show the groundwater going towards the harbor.
I think that's everyone's best guess, but it's an area that's interesting because you have the water on both sides, so
Right.
I'm sure there's seasonal differences.
it's, yeah, it's probably tricky.
Other questions? Questions from the public? Okay. Seeing no other questions, we have everything we need.
We do.
Jeff, you like to close on this one?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion?
Close. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Bellevue nominee trust, 119 R, Eel Point Road.
There's only one copy of the plan, so.
Thank you on behalf of the applicant, Richard Bellevue, Paul Santos, and Arthur Reed. This is a notice of intent for a set of temporary beach stairs within an area of a 5-foot wide easement that Mr. Bellevue holds over map 33, parcel 17-1, which is currently owned by Guy B. and Diana P. Snowden. So it's actually a 5-foot wide easement that runs along the western property line in this area here. Mr. Bellevue actually lives across Eel Point Road and has this easement, or is benefited by this easement, which gets him access to Nantucket Sound. So the application before you is, as I said, notice of intent for a set of essentially two temporary beach stairs. This is this first section here would be a preset aluminum Adirondack type of aluminum beach stair that Mr. Bellevue has already purchased. And then down below would be just a set of handmade, smaller set of wooden steps that would just lay down on the lower bank. What you've got out here is you've got the upper area here where the bank is. You then come down with this a little leveling area, and then you drop down where the erosion has occurred down along the bottom of the coastal beach. So that coastal beach area is down in here. There are some photos in the file. So again, temporary set of beach stairs here. They'll traverse along what's a passable, walkable slope here, and then this is a pretty significant drop where you've got the beach with a break in the dune that's been caused from the erosion. The property to the west does have an existing sand drift fencing that's been constructed. A portion of that is shown over here, but as we come further into this area, there is no protection. Snowdens currently do have a set of existing aluminum beach stairs that are in this particular area here. They are depicted on this plan. Those are an aluminum beach stairs that are kind of set into the dune. The temporary beach stair itself would be set on essentially there'd be four, you only need for 4 supports, wooden supports that would be entered in by hand. They would set, and it's just something to rest the stairs on during the season, and then that would be removed. And then again down here, the temporary wooden ones would just be a standard stair with a railing that would just come in and come out again at the beginning and end of each season. It'd be similar to the setup that we did out at the Kosei property, in which we recently permitted a set of temporary beach stairs. In that case, it was 2 sections, 2 20-foot sections, because the slope was a little bit different at that area. This area, as I said, we have basically two surfaces that we're kind of looking to traverse in that area. The project itself is outside of any mapped, anything mapped through the Mass Endangered Species Act, so no need to file with them or no need to have any comments back. We do have our DEP file number. I do have a review from Laurentide in which they did indicate where the stair profile shows that both stairs being below existing grade is their excavation of the bank or dune proposed as part of this NOI. Talks about wanting a more detailed narrative on the placement of the stairs, or the install and removal dates for the two stairways, how the stairs are going to be stored, where will they be the Commission's jurisdiction. Are there any supports proposed for the wooden beach stairs, or is it to rest on the coastal dune face, and how is it anchored to keep it moving when used? And then it says no replanting or disturbed areas is proposed in the narrative. I don't think typically you've put a restriction on, or any of the NOIs that we've done on the install and removal dates, but we're happy to go with any recommendation that the Commission may have. The stairs will be removed and stored on the Bellevue's property across Eel Point Road, which would be outside of the Commission's jurisdiction. The reason that you'll see some of the stair profile is cut into the dune here a little bit is this is a preset set of stairs. It's set at a certain angle, and what we're trying to do is limit up in the top because we've only got a 5-foot easement to deal with. We didn't want to construct a permanent platform at the top that would stay on a year-round basis, as it technically could potentially be considered a structure. So what we try to do as best we can up at the top here and work our way down without constructing any type of permanent platform at the top of the stairs. And you know, other than laying the stairs up on that lower casing dune, there was no plan to put any supports in on the lower section by the coastal, by the break in the dune on that lower section of beach stairs. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
The lower wooden stairs, I'm imagining being a little bit heavy to move every year. Are they just going to use manpower to lift it out?
I mean, you know, Mr. Bellevue, obviously, we're not going to do it himself. He's elderly, but his son-in-law and family, I'm sure they can move those in and out. It'd probably be based on that cut that's there now, maybe a 3 or 4 step setup with some framing. I don't know how long, how much it would be, but no heavier than the aluminum stairs getting in and out is, I would think, would be just as heavy, quite honestly.
So there doesn't appear to be a path at the moment on the top of the bank. So how are they going to approach the top of the bank?
Oh no, there's a path.
There is?
Oh yeah, there's a walk. You can walk right along.
All the way along there?
Yeah,
Sorry.
right along that entire side.
Thank you.
In fact, I think the path comes up and then actually cuts over, at some point cuts over to the existing beach stairs. But there is a path all the way from the Bellevue property all the way to the area. There's not necessarily a path down off the top, off the bank.
No, I understand.
Yeah, but there is a path up to that point. I will attest that it exists.
Paul, it looks like your stairs end well before the bottom of this slope.
The steepest slope is not. This is actually it's actually fairly steep up in here, but it levels off in there. It's a walkable slope that they can traverse without the need to push that stair any further down. We did look originally at another section of 20-foot stairs, but we feel it's comfortable enough for anybody once they come off that first set of stairs to just walk along that slope and get to that lower plateau.
The contour lines look about the same distance apart as they do further up.
Well, but if you go where the profile is, it kind of straightens out. It does once you lay it out, Ernie. You can walk that second section.
Okay. Yeah.
Is there anything there now, Paul? Are you replacing some older?
No, there's nothing there. There's nothing there.
The path to the top of the
It's
bank.
just a path to the top of the bank. Yeah.
So is that flat spot, is that in the dunes there? Kind of in dune grass?
It actually starts in the bank, and then that flat spot is in the break in the bottom of the dune there. There's a flat spot where the dune is.
Is that dune grass?
in that upper section, that plateau, there is a picture, I think there is some dune grass in there, yes.
I just wondered if we want some kind of an elevated walkway in there to protect the dune grass. If that's gonna be, I think if they're going to all this trouble to put the steps in, it's gonna be fairly heavily used.
Right, but there's no.
And then that would be permanent?
Well, we just didn't want to create something permanent, that was the only.
Right, right, and then they use it to.
You know,
This is an unusual land to have.
I wish people could just share their beach access.
well, it just seems like, you know, we're not here to design projects, but
It seems like when we've been in other places like this, we go down a set of steps, walk on a boardwalk, go down the last set of steps, but there's something in between to keep you from having to walk through the dune all the time.
There's that plateau.
Okay.
So they currently go walking down the bank and down the dune?
I don't know if they technically do it or whether I don't, whether they even maybe still, have an agreement with the Snowdens to use the existing beach stairs. I don't
Yeah,
know.
some of this existing, I guess it's
Pretty wide.
page 113 in our packet,
Pretty wide.
right,
kind of
it
shows,
looks like they
it
come
looks
across.
like the
There's a
walking
path, there's a path from this area to the
Yeah,
Snowden
even
stairs. Yeah.
this one shows where they would go down their easement and cut to use those stairs, yeah.
But this is the location where we have the easement.
Yeah, I'm sure there's been like a gentleman's agreement right up until now that.
We don't get a lot of these easement. I think this might be the second one.
Yeah, they're not very common.
No.
So, what crosses my mind on this is, would a permanent set of stairs elevated up off of the dune that traverses the slope better instead of digging it in on the top be ultimately better? This thing's going to go in every year. Every year it gets dug on every year. It's disruptive. Would a set of more permanent stairs built to the contour of the slope work better? And then the aluminum stairs down below seem like they might look better. I don't know if what he's purchased already would work down that bottom line.
Well, I think that's an interesting point. Why did you choose this setup? Did you think that it would be most,
Well, no, Richard came to us, he had already, he wanted it, he saw it as a set of a seasonal beach stairs. He bought the one section, you know, he had the one section, so we tried to utilize what he had in there, you know. I mean, if that section could be utilized to be a permanent year-round and we do something different, I don't think Richard would probably, I mean, I'm sure. We could discuss that with him, and I mean, maybe that's a better long-term solution.
And that's the top stairs, the aluminum stairs?
The top stairs are the aluminum ones, yeah.
Then we'll have like railings year-round, all of
Yeah, I don't know if it's
that stuff that comes with it.
I'd just rather see him off the grass. Yeah, off the ground.
Yeah.
Are the Snowden steps permanent?
No, that's an aluminum set of stairs.
That's an aluminum system.
Yeah.
Because you have to fit within the 5-foot easement as well,
That's the other problem too, is I'm limited on what I can.
construct.
Well, that would be the one thing with the. Permanent brings into some zoning issues.
Well, and the stairs, no matter how they are, they at least get people from walking down the face of the dune.
Yeah.
So the stairs are essentially a structure, you know, it's not, so the stairs are a structure for the purposes of zoning. And with only 5 feet, you can't meet the side yard. Can't meet the side yard setback. Setbacks don't work. So,
well, that
unless
makes it
there's
easy.
unless there's a potential for a variance, I guess it would be.
It makes more sense when you
Right.
go down this path. unintended.
Any questions? Questions from the public?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Open.
My name is Kevin Dale. I represent Guy and Diane Snowden, who own the property the stairs are going on. And there's been a good relationship between the Snowdens and Mr. Bellevue over time. In fact, they've allowed him to use their stairs, no problems with that. They just want to raise a few concerns, most of which are set forth in the Laurentide letter, but what's not before you are the dimensions of the stairs, the aluminum stairs. I mean, how wide are they? What are the treads like. I know they're Adirondack aluminum stairs like the Snowdens, but I think it would be helpful if you had the dimensions of both sets of stairs before you. The second thing is, although you may not have done it in the past, I think it's very important to have a removal date certain and a replacement date certain in the order, preferably Memorial Day to perhaps the end of September, just so that's codified. The other questions I have are, if the wooden stairs are not to be secured in any way, what does that really mean? And how are they going to avoid the ravages of erosion, which are pretty tough out there? I mean, what's the structural method to put those wooden stairs in? Be helpful to know that. Another question, what are the work protocols? How are the stairs going to be moved from where they are now to the location? Is the proposal to come down the 5-foot wide easement path? I don't think that's feasible. Is it to cross the Snowden bank, where there's no easement or right to do that, or come up the beach? It'd be helpful to know that. I already said the stairs would be removed and stored on the Bellevue property in off-season. How will that be done? It'd be helpful to know that. And lastly, what efforts will be made to restore the work area to its prior condition each time the stairs are removed? Will there be material, nourishment? What will be done there? I think that the application is a bit bare bones. It needs more information, more amplification. If there's a concern about protecting the grass and the vegetation that's there, that should be addressed too. But overall, the Snowdens aren't opposed to this. They just think that the commission needs more information before it makes a decision.
Do the Snowdens have still a problem with them using their stairs?
No. And I'm a little surprised, really. I mean, the Snowdens' preference would be not to see another set of beach stairs there. They'd be happy to let the Bellevues use the existing stairs.
Would they put that into a contract, into an easement?
Well, I don't know where they're putting the contract. It's been a neighborly thing. It's been
Right.
going on now for 20 years.
It certainly would be in our interest if there wasn't a second set of stairs, but
The other thing I want to mention, just for the record, with respect to a permanent set of stairs, I think there are zoning issues. I think it is a structure, but I'm not sure the scope of the existing easement, which is an access easement, allows for putting a permanent structure within the access area that would block access, arguably.
well,
One might say that the stairs provide access, but irrespective of whether the stairs provide access or don't, it would constitute a permanent structure within the confines of the easement, which I think is problematic.
primarily the language of the easement expressly calls for it to be an easement for access and beach stairs. So I think that there's no question that beach stairs can be placed within it.
Hey, I'm Linda Bellevue, the daughter of Richard. The Snowden's property is on the market for sale, and that's what made us decide to put our own set of stairs in, because highly unlikely the new buyer will want neighbors using their beach stairs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm kind of uncomfortable with that bottom set of stairs just setting on the dune and not, I think it'd be better to have supports in place that it's, permanent supports that it's up off the dune. Because the dunes are just so fragile if you,
Right.
I mean, everything.
We'd certainly have to monitor the status of the dune if we allowed them to go in like that.
How long is that, what's the length of that bottom set?
Oh,
15 feet or something?
what's that?
Not even 10 feet.
Yeah, not even, probably, it's probably less than 10. Yeah.
According to scale. It's almost
7 8 stairs.
that's a pretty good, it's a straight, it's a cut.
That'd be better as a structure, just.
So what if the dune changes shape and the stairs become inadequate?
That's what we're gonna have to, they're gonna have to come back. Yeah, I mean, that set of stairs is probably gonna change on a yearly,
Oh, I was about to say, especially right
on
detail.
a yearly
that
basis,
structure.
how that
Yeah.
structure looks is always
So
gonna
at
have to
this
change.
present time, this
Yeah.
somewhat scale would work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of worried about a moving disturbance up and down the face of that dune then, or along the dune, and
Good question.
I don't know what the answer is.
Paul, do they feel they can get it up the easement and carry it back to their property?
I don't think they have a choice.
Yeah.
I mean,
Long
that's
behind the
that's where
easement.
the easement,
Yeah.
the easement doesn't grant them to, move on any improvements or machinery to maintain the easement
Yeah.
wherever they want. Is their area to access is
Right.
5 feet wide,
Yeah.
and I think they're
That's it.
obligated to whatever they want to do. If
Right.
they're hauling a kayak to go paddle out in the sound, they have to stay within the easement. They
Mhm.
can't.
I don't think it's feasible
traverse.
to move those stairs down a 5-foot wide easement.
I guess we need to see, we need to see, I'd like to see something. I mean, how high are they,
Oh, that's the width of the stairs that you have right there. It's less than the 5, there's the 5 foot wide easement and the
some kind
stairs
of
are.
drawing of them or
It's like,
something?
well,
Yeah, I've got the cut sheets for it, that's not a problem. I have no problem with, continuing and providing some more information until everyone's comfortable with it, no problem at all. But this is all to scale, there's your 5 foot easement, and those stairs are inside of it. A man picks up one end, the other end, they can walk right down the easement.
We
Right.
certainly can provide
Yeah.
all the information that's been
Yeah.
asked for,
Yeah.
continue to the next meeting.
That'll be good. Okay, so unless there's any other questions, we'll continue in 2 weeks. Great. Thank you.
12, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, we have a meeting.
Thank you.
Well, I'll keep everyone for next Monday.
Yeah, the next one, we can, yeah.
On in Nantucket, 1 C Street.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm David Gray, for the town of Nantucket, the sewer director, the one that's overseeing this project. This is for the C Street Pump Station, located down behind the construction. I'm sure many are probably familiar with the structure. I'm here with my engineer, Kevin Rafferty from Hazen and Sawyer, to ask any questions and do the presentation. So I will. Rafferty. I will let Kevin take it from here.
Okay. Good evening. The C Street Pump Station is an existing structure that's probably about 7 years old, and it's coming down to the end of its useful life and the equipment that's inside it. And so this project is going to be replacing the electrical and mechanical equipment in it, and also upgrading with HVAC equipment. Part of this project is to remove an outbuilding, to demolish an outbuilding that's in the back there, which is used for storage, used for the generator building. And so this structure being removed is also going to be the site of where they're going to relocate a generator and some motor control equipment. And part of this project is to protect the whole site from flooding, from surface flooding from storm surges. So the equipment that is outside of the building is going to be elevated on pads above the 8-foot 100-year flood zone, and also the building itself is going to have a skirt wall, a foundation wall that is going to be at an elevation that is above the flood zone to protect the unreinforced brick structure. So on the plans here, there is an existing, this building here is going to be demolished, and in its place in the same footprint is going to be this elevated pad for the odor control equipment, and also for the generator itself. Now there is another, there's in the transformer, the electric transformer, is going to be on its own pad. It's separate from the generator per code. It can't be set on that rated pad, so it has its own pad. And in the NOI, this is, the C Street area is outside of any wetlands. It's in the developed area. And the reason why it's triggered by the NOI is because it is in the non-linear floodplain. So.
Well, not that it has any direct bearing, why can't it be on the same pad?
It has to be separated by distance. It's a code thing for electrical.
Right.
Currently, the electrical pad now sits on the other side of the building, almost up against the building, and it no longer meets electrical code, so you have to move it away from the structure.
So this equipment will essentially be exposed now?
It's currently the odor control system that we have there now. We're just moving it, relocating to the back of the building. It's been out in the elements. The electric motor and stuff will be in the weather-tight housing. The generator that's currently there now is non-compliant with any of the EPA regulations as far as emissions. And in order to put a compliant generator in the structure that's there, we would have had to raise the structure another whole floor level because of all the emission stuff. So we found it easier to put a new generator outside in a noise attenuated cabinet on top of the fuel tank outside, well outside the floodplain. Right now, the floor level of the pump station as it sits now is just about elevation 5. So this is going to improve everything, get everything well up above any flow, coastal flow storage that comes flowage that comes through there that we have seen in the past. It's going to be protected by a fence, so it won't be seen by the yacht club or anything. It's going to have the same matching fences and everything. So it's
Well, if you wait for 3 months, the EPA apparently is going to change their direction.
quite possible. I don't get
Not
much
that
sleep
I'm
because of this
encouraging.
pump station as it is now.
Right.
This pump station is in desperate need of an upgrade. This will improve everything and let everybody sleep very comfortably.
I get up in the middle of the night and be more comfortable that when they actually go somewhere.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, how many gallons per day does this station move?
This station pumps about 85% of the entire island's flow. It covers flows all the way from Monomoy High School. Everything comes to the C Street pump station. During extreme flooding cases we've had over the last couple of years, last winter for one, during that big flood that flooded all the way up to just about the town building, we were doing over 2 million gallons a day of pure salt water for a couple of days. So this station is extremely important. It's amazing that this is basically the heartbeat of the whole entire court district. Hence the reason I don't get a lot of sleep occasionally. When there's a storm, we actually man this station during storms. We have to, just to make sure everything runs right. So.
To answer your question, the dry weather is 1.3 million gallons a day. If there's a rain event, the combined systems can get up to 5 million.
Yeah.
So
What
I
about
only ask 'cause I
halftime
want
at the
everyone to
Super
understand
Bowl?
the quantity that-
Right.
That's when you worry.
Right.
It averages this time of year anywhere between 750,000, just a little over a million, and then when it rains, we pump up quite drastically.
So what's the horsepower?
Currently, the pumps that are in there now are, we have 360 horsepower pumps that are in there now. The new configuration as designed is we're going to be going to a 4-pump system, and the new pumps are going to be what they're called dry pit submersibles. They're actually the submersible pumps that will be inside the basement. So if for some reason the structure was to flood, all the electrical components are going to be well 10 foot high, and pumps can run underwater. They're basically designed to run underwater. So we're going to a system now that if it floods, it's game over, to a system that these pumps are designed to run underwater.
Cool. Now you change it to a tier 4 generator system.
And the
so
generator
you're
system,
upgrading everything.
because of it's considered emergency use only, we only have to go to tier 3. We don't have to go to the tier 4. We've looked at both, and because of the emergency use status, we can go to tier 3s. And it will be in a noise attenuated cabinet, and the fencing itself will have screening around it to help with that. And
and the newer ones are much quieter than the ones that's there.
So the emergency one is what's it using for fuel?
It's not diesel fuel. It's all diesel. And it's in a double-wall self-contained tank that sits underneath the generator. Currently, the tank that's there now is a single wall, just on floor level. Basically, a home heating oil tank that sits there now. So that's all coming out, and this will be raised and elevated, so it should be well outside the flood levels.
That's probably the most important thing.
Well, yes, that's one of my big concerns.
That's the big one.
And the transformer itself is all contained, has its own contained thing, so that's a requirement of National Grid.
I know this isn't part of our purview. Does this have to go in front of HDC?
We already have.
See, like a chain link fence. I'm like, all right.
It was a couple of attempts there, but we finally got through it.
You could just tell them we'll discontinue, abandon the pump station. Whichever
Yeah,
one.
that's, we have an hour. If something was to critically ever go wrong with the station, we have an hour before it's game over. So. Which means it's coming up wherever it can come up. It's an extremely important piece of the infrastructure.
I think we better let them fix it, huh?
Don't you need two?
Well, that's why we've gone to extra pumps. I mean, they're going to be bigger pumps, so that we have the 2 force mains that go out of town. So it's been a process to get this design where we wanted it. So.
How long is it gonna take?
It's hoping to be awarded April 4th to the contract, and we're hoping that they start construction within a couple of months. This will be we're going to be working through the summer. We've already gone for our variances and our waivers to be able to work through the summer because the station's in such bad shape. So.
Peak season?
Before the storm season?
You're going to do it during peak season?
It's going to be, we're going to be bypassing the station with pumps and stuff like that so that they can get in there and do a lot of the interior work. The force mains inside the structure now currently drip. They do leak. So.
Yum.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good thing.
Go.
2 weeks I go on vacation, so.
Wait until April the 5th.
Other questions? Questions from the public? If not, we have everything you want to close on this one?
Yes, sir.
And you would like to close?
Yes, sir.
Okay, motion? All in favor?
Thanks, guys.
See you, David.
Thank you. Let's see, we got another pump, yeah.
Oh, no, don't worry. David's got the next project.
That's it,
Next
we got another
project.
pump.
You're on a
10
roll.
Nantucket, Walmasquid Place Road, yeah.
Good evening again, everyone. Again, David Gray, I am Building Director for the town of Nantucket. This is one piece of a very large Shimo Nantucket Harbor and plus sewer project. This is one element, and this is luckily one of the only elements that we ended up running into any issues as far as wetlands for having to file. This location, if you're not familiar with it, is down inside the Hussey Farm Meadowview subdivision, at the very end of the Walmasquid Place cul-de-sac. What we are trying to do is that entire neighborhood, all the way from pretty much Hummock Pond Road, all the way down through, we're going all the way over through Friendship Lane, Marsh Hawks, Somerset. And we do have the map that shows, I don't know if anyone has seen it yet. So all this area, 90% of this whole system is going to be a gravity system with a hybrid, with some pumps going to be required in some areas. So this is for the pump station itself. I will let Kevin and Steve and Patty, they can come into this if we have any questions. They can explain to you the pump station layout, why we have to do what we're doing down there. So with that, I'll leave it over to Steve and the gentleman from, these are the guys from Weston and Sampson, the other engineering firm that's working on this project.
Thank you, David. However, it's best for people to see you. So my name is Steve Peterson with Weston and Sampson Engineers. Obviously, working for the town, I have Drew Patno here with me, who's done a lot of the design work on this project. We're specifically here to talk about the pump station at the end of Walmasquid, which David pointed out to you. So just quickly, to get an idea of what he was talking about, I think David pretty much explained this all to you. So this is a collection system for this entire neighborhood. Most of the work is related to pipelines in the traveled way, which do not fall under, which are exempt from the NOI. But the one area where we are before you tonight is for the pump station. And basically all the flow from this area is flowing down by gravity. All the red lines are gravity sewer that will collect flow from these areas and bring it to this low spot. And from here we'll pump it back up and into up Hussey Farm Road and out to Vesper Lane, where it goes, ties into the existing system. So specifically what you have in front of you with this submittal is the site plan for the pump station itself. So here's Walnut Place. We've got our gravity sewer will be coming down the road, and here's where it comes in to the site. Pump station structures here, and then force main back up. This is the paved surface of the cul-de-sac, and then there's an island in the middle. We're proposing to do the pump station work in the island here in the middle. So there's roadway all around. The wetland area is off to the south, I guess, of the site here. So we've got our wetlands flags here, and then we've shown the buffer zones: the 25-foot, the 50-foot, and the 100-foot. So everything is within the 100-foot, and specifically there are some structures within the 50-foot that we're requesting a waiver on. I guess is specifically what I'm here. So if I can just go over the layout with you. As I said, the gravity sewers themselves come in. This is the main excavation. This is the wet well itself. The pumps are in the wet well itself. There's submersible pumps that are down in the bottom of the wet well. So this structure right here is the primary excavation. We drop the wet well in, the flow's collected in there, and then pumped out through the force main. As far as the above ground structures, back here is the main structure. So this is an 8x8 precast utility enclosure. This is where all the controls are going to go so that these guys can maintain the station. So basically all the electrical equipment that operates the pumps will be located in this enclosure here. And behind it is the generator, similar to what David was talking about, except much smaller. The generator at this station is this, compared to the station that's pumping the entire town. This is pumping about 130 gallons a minute. So this is a smaller neighborhood pump station. So the generator itself is on a sound attenuated enclosure on a concrete pad, and then we've got a cedar fence around the generator itself, basically butting up to the building. So you have the building and then the cedar fence. This generator is going to be run off of propane. The propane tank is being buried, so this won't be above ground. This is a below ground structure. And then the one other thing that adjacent to the wet well, the valving for the pipes, some shut-off valves, check valves, gate valves, to isolate the different pumps and stuff are up above grade so that the operators can have the ability to do that function without having to enter the pump station or having that in the environment of the wet well. So that's the basic layout of the station. The other, so over here we've created impervious area with the building, the generator, basically, and a couple of hatches, and then the driveway to the station is right here. So as part of the stormwater piece for the work that we're doing here, any of this new runoff is going to be directed to a deep sump catch basin at the front of the site, and then run through some storm tech chambers, infiltrator chambers, to infiltrate the groundwater, the stormwater back into the ground, to create no additional runoff than what the site already sees. And that's all Appendix D or E of the submittal, the whole stormwater report is in there. So I think that's the basic, just so the structures, so I mentioned what the structures are. So that the building is just inside of the 50-foot, and so that's what we're requesting a waiver for. So I'll open up the questions.
So I have a question.
Sure.
How deep is the underground propane tank go? What's the groundwater separation from the bottom of the tank?
So we have a boring that we did here, and there's an observation well, groundwater observation well in there. So today we measured the groundwater. Well, in December when it was installed, it was measured at 18 feet. Today it was measured at 16 feet below grade at the site. Propane tanks probably buried about 4 feet, David? Yeah. About 4 feet.
Great, thank
The bottom of the tank is 4 foot down, or the top of it?
We're talking a 250 gallon tank, I believe, and they're about 4.5 feet in diameter, so you're talking, bottom of the tank should be around 6.5 feet, so we should have a good 10-foot separation.
So that's a breakwater table. That's at the same grade.
Potentially,
Yeah.
yeah. That's what we're thinking
Yeah, I
in
remember
the
it
area.
flooding back there.
We were surprised that the groundwater is 60. We measured it today,
Yeah.
and high groundwater, and it's 16 feet down.
Do you guys have any plans for dewatering in case when digging a bigger hole proves to be?
So the specification, there's information in the packet there, but so the specifications themselves give the contract. We don't have a contractor yet. We need the permit so we can go out to bid. And the specifications put a lot of parameters on him about what he has to follow. We don't dictate exact means and methods. He's going to submit to us how he's going to do it. But yes, for this hole, most likely he's going to have to drop some pumps down into the hole just to keep the groundwater down so that he can set the bottom and set his wet well and come up. There's a lot of language in there about, so we've got the siltation control. We've got straw wattles along the outside of the site. And his dewatering, prior to that, he'll have to go through some additional siltation control where he discharges it up at the ground site. So he'll be discharging it up in here. We'll probably bring in like a frac tank or set up some kind of, hay bale system where he dumps it in there so that you get more silt. And then we've got the additional, before it can get over to across the. So then we've got the road that it's going to cross if it migrates off the site before it hits those. So that's in general how the dewatering would work.
Steve, I know we have a road and everything that's past the 20, what is it? The road is past the 50 for sure, but even past the 25.
Yeah, the road is into the 25.
So, I guess I'd ask, why was this whole structure, why wasn't it put outside the 50? Because it looks like there's plenty of room to do it. Was it?
So we don't want to put the structure in the road.
No, of course.
So up in here, all right. So we've run into, we're trying to keep it from encroaching on the excavation. If we move everything up and the wet well comes up, then we're going to be encroaching on, excavation into the road and having the wet well structure there. We've got a water main coming through to a hydrant back here that we start getting closer to.
That's what I'm getting at. Like, why is it laid out the way it's laid
Yeah,
out?
yeah. And it would get very tight in the hole, digging the hole that we are. We're just trying not to.
So there's already a line on the road that already goes up. There's already both the sewer main is already going up the road.
So this will be new.
Oh, so
This is a new sewer.
There
There are no sewers in the state.
That's what I thought.
So once, yeah.
Okay. Well, I was about to say, we're the road, we didn't need it up.
All the subjects around there failed.
Yeah. Okay, other questions? Questions from the public?
Some major improvements to our sewer system.
Yeah.
That's right. We're getting ready to see a lot of applications for sewer tie-ins.
Yeah, I think so. It sounds like.
But to answer your question, yes, we do have all of the required information necessary.
Oh, I have the note, if you butter note.
Oh, perfect.
Any shrubs or anything going back in this circle for screening, coverage?
So right now, all that's planned is the cedar fence to shield the generator and possibly the front of the building. We're amenable to other site, to work with whoever. So we have a meeting in May. We're setting up with the residents in the area to talk to them a little bit more about the project as a whole. I'm sure this will be the biggest topic. But. So at this point, we don't have any specific plans to put any in, but that could become part of the plan if that's what the outcry is, I guess.
Is there an electrical transformer in that circle now?
There is also an electrical transformer in that same area, yes.
Yeah, actually, that's right here. Yeah, I didn't mention that either. So that's another reason to push it.
It pushes it down.
The invasive mess that's in that circle.
They may be doing us a favor getting rid of all the vegetation. I don't know.
Okay. Well, less than more than a question. So are you ready to close?
Yes, sir. I'd like to close it.
Someone make a motion?
Yeah, move to close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sewer department's busy. How can you go on vacation? A lot going on, man.
Not tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I mean,
He's just waiting for all those bids to get open, and then he is out of here before they start. It's just one chance he has, right?
In 2 weeks. Okay, Nantucket Island Land Bank.
This is the one that continues, Mr.
District,
Chairman.
that's right. I didn't write it down. Thank you very much. Very good. Vandenborn, 135 All Went Way.
yeah, and it looks like a lemonade stand. This driveway.
Yeah, it does look like a lemonade stand or something, like a pink umbrella.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, I'm here before you tonight with the notice of intent for residential redevelopment of property located north of the Wawinnet Inn. We've got a few resource areas to go over here, and the quick overview of the project is that we're going to pick up a existing single-family home, move it back a bit, and put it up on a pile foundation and upgrade the septic system. It sounds a little more complicated than that, so we'll go through each piece really of the overall project. Shown in outlined in red on the plan before you is the outer limits of all of the existing structural elements associated with the house. So you've got a single-family dwelling with porches, steps, and then boardwalks at grade. There is also boardwalks that traverse the site in a north-south direction and an east-west direction. And those boardwalks currently rest on grade. The proposal involves what we see as an overall net benefit through a reduction of structural area on the site, and much of that is accomplished by the removal of those existing boardwalks. They will be, one of the boardwalks that runs east-west would be replaced with an elevated fiber-grade walkway, as you're familiar with. That would allow the owners to cross the vegetated wetland to the west in order to get to Wawinnet Road and ultimately to the beach. The structure will be lifted. It's well, I guess I'll just back up and go over the resource areas that we're dealing with. We have on site a bordering vegetated wetland. We have an isolated vegetated wetland, which is located, the bordering vegetated wetland is to the west. We have an isolated vegetated wetland to the north. We also are within mapped barrier beach in entirety. And so as such, it also then presents a designation of coastal dune. The entire site is also located within land subject to coastal storm flowage. There's then the buffer zones that are associated with the IVW and the BVW. So I've shown those on the plan, the 25 and the 50. A very small portion of the site is outside of the 50, one corner, the southeast corner. Other than that, the entire site is within overlapping resource areas as well as then buffer zones. The existing septic system is very close to groundwater, perhaps even in the groundwater. I don't know the depth of it, but either way, it certainly doesn't pass inspection or provide the required separation distance. So regarding the septic system, we're proposing to remove that in its entirety from the site, and then to add a new septic tank and then a septic tank processor
and an elevated leach bed, which would provide at least a 5-foot separation distance to groundwater. And so you can see in the southeast corner of the property, the oblong lines represent the proposed contouring of that mound in order to achieve that separation distance and elevation. The leach bed itself is outside of the 25, but completely within the 50-foot buffer zone. The limits of disturbance for the septic system go down to about 8 feet away from to the border and vegetated wetland. The structure part of the project, the current wetland runs underneath the existing house. So essentially, you've got an existing structure within defined resource area, and we're proposing to back that structure away and reduce a portion of that footprint within that resource area. And also, again, the structure would be lifted and placed on a pile foundation so that you have greater ease of flooding and sand to move under the structure. I will get to the Laurentide report, but on that one point, he had noted that there was some lattice work proposed, and we can certainly. The architect is here, and we can work to perhaps modify that a bit to get a little bit greater of area with respect to allowing the sand and the water to move underneath the structure. The other piece of the project that I'd like to go over is just a slight change in the parking areas. On the southeast corner of the site is an existing 2-car parking area, which would be removed in its entirety and restored. And then on the north side is a parking area which we're proposing to expand by about 100 square feet, and that is simply so that we could have a zoning conforming parking space on the property, a 9x20 space. So that would get closer to the isolated vegetated wetland. As I think many of you saw on the site there's a bit of a level area and then it falls off. So we're not proposing any grade change there. We're not proposing any grade change with the project with respect to the house. Any of the grade change in the fill is related to creating the elevated septic system for the separation distance to groundwater. With respect to the structure itself on the plan, along the bottom, what I've done is to include the footprint calculations for you. And as I said, what I did was to include all of the existing boardwalks, porches, and decks, which comes to about 3,000 square feet. And then the new structural footprint would be about 2641. So we've got a decrease there of about 359 square feet of structural area. And then we would have a new elevated fibergrate walkway, which I didn't include as structural area given that it is elevated and porous. So there's a difference there, but I wanted to be sure that you're aware of that. So I didn't include that in the calculations and have that separated out. I do understand from both the site visits as well as from the Laurentide report that there are some concerns with the application we'll have to have a discussion on, and though we have tried to present it in a way that does improve the current situation, and that is by lifting the house, removing, as I think many of you saw, the damage to the vegetation from the boardwalks at grade. And I think with that, I'd be happy to hear questions and other concerns, and ultimately go from there.
All right, has there been talk about? I know there's been talk about removing this walkway that was in real poor repair, right? But how about these?
Right, all of the labeled existing boardwalks which are all resting on grade, and we believe that's a big piece of the net benefit to this application. Those areas I should have mentioned, and it's noted on the plan, would all be restored as well with, I proposed American beach grass or to match surrounding vegetation, but as we saw, I think in the field, I would think that beach grass would be a very appropriate species to plug in that whole area. Anything that's damaged, not only disturbed areas from the construction process, but where the boardwalks were, that we would revegetate all of that. And with the new elevated walkway, that is going to serve that same purpose. And the elevated walkway meets your performance standards and regulations with respect to how you would traverse a vegetated wetland.
So is it going to have handrails?
No, so I've specified on the plan, it's specifically 18-inch minimum and 30-inch maximum. So that's the grade change to avoid the, any concerns with the, additional structure or vistas, and, I know there's a fair amount of deer activity, and we don't believe there'd be any, impact on wildlife that could either easily go over or under.
So how many square feet are being actually added to the existing building? Because the math seems a little convoluted to me.
So I would have to break that down, right? I sort of did a lump. I do have my calculations with me, but I think probably I should take notes for the questions and then respond.
We didn't actually get to read the Untitled report, did we? It's not
I didn't see it.
I have a copy of it.
We're missing several Untitled reports.
We're going to continue this, Art, do you
His
think?
report's
I
marked.
don't have a file number, so.
Oh, I'm writing on the back of it.
That's right, I can bring it up.
Joe will give us one or Jeff.
But they're being included for, I'm sure it's included next time.
Yeah,
So there, if I may, there was 2 Laurentide reports. The initial one came out in time for me to respond and make some modifications to the plan, which I thought was most appropriate to get, since I was able to get it in before your deadline for this meeting. So, and what I just handed is his response to my response, which really has many of the same concerns, and then sort of builds on them. But again, I had that here, thinking that it may be helpful to go through those as I had done in the response letter, which I believe you have.
You do have a response.
I think that the boardwalk, which was his first one, I think is a clear improvement. We saw those conditions, from what's there, getting that out of there. And then the septic, I think also, I think the question on the septic to be discussed is the proximity to the border and vegetated wetland, and then the fill that's associated, whereas normally you wouldn't allow fill within the land subject to coastal storm flowage, or within a barrier beach or dune. We've requested a waiver, and in my project narrative, I very specifically went through, so I'd be happy to try to address those too as well if you felt they needed additional justification. But we tried to lay out each per resource area, per regulation, what's needed for essentially ultimately all in the attempt of a net benefit situation.
I have 2 questions. The fibergrate walkway, it says it's on helical anchor supports, so how much area do those take up along the way?
Sure. So those are typically like an 8-inch plate that gets drilled in, but at the end it's only a 2-inch square post, right, that comes up out of the ground. So they are even less than a 4x4 support. And the nicer thing is that when you use that kind of a support, as opposed to digging 4x4 posts where you have a big spoil pile, and the way that we've done a couple of them, like the one at Gardner Farm, right, for example, it's gonna be exactly the same, is there is a hydraulic unit and then two men carry out the auger, so it's, you know, what I would consider to be probably the least impact way of supporting. But at the end of the day, it's a 2-inch square post that comes out, and then it's got a bracket on the top that the stringer sits in.
So, Art, if you're coming up the front porch down to that 30-inch high walkway, wouldn't you eliminate 2 or 3 of those steps to the grade? I mean, would that kind of push it back to the front of the porch?
Well, I think that it's not going to be 30 inches high at that point. Because the surface elevation there is higher than what's in the wetlands. So we're envisioning that it would be a level walkway. So the 30 inches, when you see there's spot elevations in the wetland area, they're down at like 2.5. So that's the reason.
Okay.
And perhaps also you may be able to eliminate one stair. We took it at the sort of a worst case scenario there, but you might be able to get rid of a stair.
Okay.
Do we know how we're going to get that, move the building out of the way for the piers, and how the piers are going to be?
So the way that it was explained to me is that it would be similar to sort of an in-town type project where they're going to work from the street side and to slide the steel in from this side. And you can see that I know there's a lot on the plan, but maybe I should have gone, or could then for the next one go to a larger scale. But the dark line is the silt fence, and so you know, we would envision that you would take the porches off, carry that material back around, that, you know, and then you would have some area to work, you know, a good 8 feet around the structure that's there. So I know that Laurentide had raised that, but that would be, you know, I think that once you take the porches off, that you would have that area, and then it wouldn't require extensive excavation by sliding the beams in this side.
And so probably a crane would draw it, probably
I think the two things that they could either look at would be a crane or, you know, the cribbing and roller assemblies to get it back out of the way. And then you would come in around it with probably most likely a skid steer with a hydraulic attachment for the, again, most likely helical piers, or if they were going to be driven piles, then you would use a crane or a large excavator with a reach and a vibratory hammer. But again, at the permitting stage, we don't, you know, those are all of the options, one way or the other, but we would look that the limit of work would be the, you know, as shown on the plan.
I feel like this is a slightly stupid question, but if the septic is mounded, and I know you mentioned with the house coming up that the dune would be able to migrate better, how is that going to impact the potential for the sand dune to migrate and move?
Well, I mean, it seems to me that the septic mound is only touching upon, you know, one corner of the house, whereas all the rest of it is still open in all the other directions. And I would also say that, you know, this is, with all of the vegetated wetlands that you have here, while I say that it's dune, it's as a function of the mapped barrier beach, this clearly isn't, you know, both vegetated wetland and dune. Right, so the dune area really is where the septic is going.
Okay.
I guess what I'm concerned with, Art, is that you seem to be practically doubling the size of the house in an area where normally you wouldn't really allow any new construction, and that the boardwalk is your sort of sacrificial boardwalk. And am I summing this up wrong?
No, I think that I wouldn't say it's a sacrificial. I think that, you know, what we're trying to weigh is that the boardwalk is sitting on that grade and killing that vegetation and having an impact. And for the commission to weigh is that an equivalent offset? And if not, what is perhaps, right? Where we are, you know, very close to that number. And so, ultimately, the house design has been, done in a way for, to work for the owners and to fit within the zoning setbacks, and to meet the requirements. But in terms of, it's, when you say sacrificial, we do feel that it's making it better by getting rid of that. So, in other words, if you were to say, keep the same exact size house and just pick it up and move it back, well then the boardwalks probably would, or possibly remain. And again, I think that's the trade-off that we're trying to show, is that we can develop a project that may need some more work, but we've come forward with what's been designed, and that doesn't get any closer to the vegetated wetland, and the expansion is in an area that is away from the vegetated wetland. So, and I can get to the areas specifically.
Yeah. I know this probably is a fairly preliminary drawings, but the spacing and the under the house, and will the sand be able to move through this vertical?
So we can look at the skirt boards, right? I sort of hadn't, I was thinking of it just elevated on pilings, but certainly we can look at a skirt or perhaps a lattice type of a detail that I can work with Luke on. He obviously has to balance HTC, as well, which I'm not, but certainly I can get you some more information on that opening, because I saw Lawrence comment on that.
We had done a bunch down in Hobart Ave. We can look at those same.
Yeah, I think
that was approved. We had
examples.
Spacing for that area. I didn't know about that enough.
Yeah.
And you are increasing roof space, correct?
Yes.
Is anything going to happen with the roof drainage?
No, and I would say that the material is so pervious in this area that you see very little runoff, as a result of an impervious structure.
Art, can you make the case for our benefit for the septic system over at Type 10?
Well, again, you've got an existing on-site system, so that's, one thing that we look at is, again, and I think similar to, as Jeff did earlier, we see the Title V views tight tanks as an absolute last alternative, right? And so I've come up with a way, though it requires relief from your regulations, Board of Health regulations, that does allow, that would work for an on-site system to physically fit. The soil conditions don't preclude it. There is a way to do it. So that is the balance. The trade-off is, is it preferred to have an on-site system than to go to a tight tank? And I think it's that's a bit of it's a fair discussion, and a tight tank would remove the need for the mounding. Under Title V, you would have to go to, there is an option that allows for a tight tank under, if you were to go to a seasonal deed use restriction. Again, the other case of getting a tight tank is to show a hardship that it otherwise wouldn't be allowed. That otherwise an on-site system couldn't be done. So we would have to go through that process as well. I'll tell you, the owners aren't thrilled with the mound. There's no doubt about that. But the thought of having to have a truck there pumping out on a regular basis versus coming up with a system that does reduce the nitrogen by at least 50%, typically greater, then we felt like we should show that this was our option to do that. And if there was great concern, with this from you or from DP or the Board of Health, then we would look at that option.
So, how is this removing 50% of the nitrogen?
So the second tank that you see on the plan is a Septitech processor.
Gotcha.
So it's a
Same one.
denitrification system,
Gotcha.
correct.
Obviously improving over what's there. Big time. Do you have a depth of groundwater on this site? How does that work?
Yeah, you know, I had some tests from a while back. I could get it to you, but certainly, I mean, it's not going to be any greater than, elevation 3 is what I was working off of, assumed at this point with a surface elevation of 5, which is how I got the bed, but I could go back to look to find the soil tests they've done quite a long time ago for that.
Right, I mean, I'm sure this is more of a health department issue.
I could do with a shovel and
No.
get you a number.
None of us really probably have the expertise in this, but, yeah, that mound is quite intense. And, I mean, mounded systems, I'm gonna be a big fan of. It's probably the highest groundwater I've ever seen one. But,
When you finish, Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Please.
I was just curious, just from application of the regulations standpoint, do you know the date that the existing system was installed, give or take?
No idea. There is no records at the health department except for like a sketch on there's on one inspection form that an inspector sketched out something.
That's awesome.
So and I pulled those and I just checked them again last week or 3 weeks ago.
So what was the date on this?
I'm sorry?
What was the date on the sketch?
2009. Yeah, right. Like someone did an inspection
And we're like, oh,
failed the system.
So
and this is what they found.
The reason I ask is because this doesn't come up very often for us because we never ever see leach fields inside of the 100-foot buffer zone, let alone the 50-foot buffer zone. So typically under the Wetlands Protection Act, so the state part of the act, the state allows leach facilities within the 100. Our local regulations do not. The sticky wicket in this case is the state regulations require a minimum of 50 feet that's there. Now, if you're replacing an existing system that predates the regulations, that setback requirement isn't there. Which is why I asked the age of the existing system for dealing with that, because we don't have the ability to waive state regulations. There's not a procedure for that. So I'm just trying to make sure that we get all of the information that you guys need to do the analysis of the state act, because it's not something that comes up very often. Because that's a little tricky. I'm sure.
Well, I think that, what we could show is the overall age of the structure clearly predates the regulations, and it had plumbing, the waste was going somewhere. So it had a system of some sort, whether it was a honeycomb or a pipe or whatever. But if you had a house with plumbing in it that was being used prior to the effective regulations.
I think if there's a positive permit that results in this and the design that you're looking at, I guess what I'm getting at is we would need to make a finding that the structure and the septic system predates the regulations, so you could enact that provision of the state act to allow, you're not waiving the regulation, you're merely meeting that, but I would think any order would want to include that piece of analysis because it's not in compliance with regulations for vegetated wetlands. Flood zone issues aside, maybe it's just one that, and I apologize for not catching it sooner, but it's something that is a little bit of a paperwork chase, but it's something that we need to just catch up on.
Do we know when it was built?
No, I mean, without a doubt, before 71. I checked the, historic aerials on that one, and the 38 photo was very unclear. The Sanborn maps it was very hard. I looked at them, I downloaded them the other day because I was wondering sort of, it was hard for me to tell which cottage is which on that.
Right.
Just,
There's no point of reference.
yeah, I can certainly say without a doubt and provide you with documentations of prior to 71, which is how I think I would also address Jeff's concern, point, and document that for you, which would allow ultimately, should you decide that this was the way to go and a net benefit to permit this system.
I mean, I have to say, I would rather see a tight tank go in here, just because of the diverse resource areas here. To put a mounded septic in the harbor watershed when we're trying to curb septics, I just think a tight tank where you're seeing the truck and you're identifying this as a very fragile area is a better way to go than a septic where it is kind of set it and forget it, hopefully it's working sort of thing. I know you have to test the septi-tech
Yeah,
tank.
if I may, it would be subject, as opposed to a conventional system, an annual operation and maintenance contract 4 times a year, sampling and being checked on by the operator. But I hear you, can see your point, but it's not
it's not
same as just letting it a conventional system, which doesn't get checked or inspected unless you have a transfer of property or something like basically even the conventional systems, all systems now under the local regs are every 5 years inspected in the Harbor Watershed District.
We haven't talked much about the little parking area one increase. So it's a single car space?
Right. So shown here is that, basically we're trying to make enough area so that you would have zoning requires a 9 by 20 spot so that you could pull in, so we're extending that about 6 feet, 9 feet wide, maybe 7 feet. So that's the expansion.
Yeah. Just sand.
Sand, yeah. We're not trying to go build, and they actually had initially, I had a 2-car spot, two car. I just sort of extended what was there, and that was one of the changes that we made from Lauren Tide's initial report, was to reduce that to just what we just need, plus getting rid of the other area, and we would replant that other area with beach grass.
Other questions? Questions from the public?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emily Wilson for the Nantucket Land Council. There's a variety of activities being proposed with this application, and I always think it's important to consider waivers for different activities on their own merits, but especially in this situation, being in the barrier beach, I just wanted to draw the Commission's attention to the local performance standards under barrier beaches. It actually specifies that buildings that pre-exist the regs can be maintained and repaired, but it actually talks about no new construction of buildings. It's a little different from a lot of the other resource areas where it just talks about structures. One thing that I wasn't sure of, I just couldn't recall if the elevated boardwalks that, like the ones being proposed here that are typically put in, if the Commission typically considers those structures and grants a waiver for them. I know they're usually used to cross resource areas, or if there's been a determination before that they're not structures. But if they are still structures, then that's worth considering as well as far as overall footprint. And I understand the perspective of the structural footprint analysis, including everything together, but again, being in the Barrier Beach resource area, the regulations, local regs are specific about no new building construction. So I don't think you can look at the change in footprint of the boardwalk and associate that with a trade-off in the change in building footprint. In the Barrier Beach, I feel pretty strongly that the regulations say no new buildings. So I think that certainly there's a very good argument to be made that raising the structure moving it, doing all of that there's some net benefit there, but I just don't think that a waiver can be granted to increase the footprint of a building in the barrier beach based on local performance standards. As far as a net benefit with the other components of the project, again, I think it has to be considered separately from other structural elements in this instance. And as far as the septic system goes, I think questioning the tight tank option is certainly valid given the proximity. I mean, I agree that this is certainly an improvement over whatever is out there now. But also my understanding with the health regulations now is that the upgrade of the septic would be required for any improvement in the building as well. It is a net benefit, but it's also going to be a requirement. So whether that justifies expanding the building, again, I'm just not sure that those things can really be balanced out. I think they have to be evaluated from a waiver perspective on their own merits. The septic certainly is a net benefit. Elements of the house move and raise. There's net benefit there, but we definitely have some concerns about the expansion of the building footprint. So I also would be interested in the square footage being added to the building for any new information coming in. And just to draw your attention to those performance standards for Barrier Beach. Thank you.
Art, is all the boardwalk that's coming out going to be replaced by elevated boardwalk, or just the one stretch going out to the beach?
Just the one stretch to the beach.
So the rest of us just coming out and revegetating?
That's correct.
Is it going to the road or the beach, or?
It goes to the road, which has a path on the other side to the beach, which may also go to one of the points with respect to the structure being a water-dependent structure. But on the area calcs, that is why I kept it separate, and I do think there's a bit of a difference given the fiber grade aspect. But again, I'll break down numbers and get you more information. We'll certainly request a continuance, and if there's enough concerns that we want to be sure that we can work to address what we can.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, so any other questions from the commission at the moment? Okay, so request to continue.
2 weeks, please.
Okay, great, we'll continue.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Marty. Jeff.
That's all right, I didn't know.
Okay, so Brandon Bourne's been continued.
Okay.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I was thinking that's where it's going.
Okay. Request for determination now. Gretchen Campbell, 1994, Revocable Trust, 7 Ocean Avenue.
Brian Maxwell, graphic engineer. So this RDA is for a new sewer connection. And it falls within, a small portion of this falls within 100 feet to coastal dune. So that's why I'm here tonight. There is an existing connection for this house. This is in Wisconsin. It's a very old area. And I guess it's believed that maybe a couple other cottages tie into the same service. And it's constantly backing up, so that's why the applicant just wants a new service. Cut off the old one and cap it.
It's a new project on there, right? Well, the rebuild, we're going on now.
Oh.
I'm working on it.
Oh, yeah.
And this is Coastal Bank down here.
It is
Coastal Dune.
but it's across the street.
Yeah, it's kind of across from the summer house.
It's actually one of the other side house cottages, isn't it?
So does the project mainly just entail trenching, putting in a pipe, filling the trench, and revegetating?
Yeah, there's no work on the house.
In the street.
Yeah, in the street, yeah.
So are we,
Pretty straightforward.
Any questions on this one? Straightforward. Do you have a recommendation?
I would recommend a -3 allowing the work in the buffer zone.
So moved. You have a second?
Second.
All those, in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes
think we're in for a lot of RDAs, just like this one,
Yeah.
sitting for sewer tie-in.
Be Dune LLC, 24 Almanac Pond.
So Brian Maxwell with Graphic Engineering. So this RDA is for a septic repair. This property has currently two separate systems, one for the pool house, one for the existing house. And Title V inspection was done, and the pool house failed because of groundwater separation. The whole property, well, both systems would fail because it also falls in the Nantucket Harbor Watershed Protection District, and it didn't have an IA system. So what we're proposing is a new single leach system outside the 100-foot buffer. And it's, the pool house is going to be pumped up to a Septi-Tech system, and from there it gets pumped to the leach field. And so the only work inside the 100-foot buffer is going to be the trenching for the force main down by the pool house, and then a small portion of construction for the leach field, being the D-box and the force main to get there. And the existing systems are going to be abandoned. The septic tank for the existing house, it's just going to be pumped and filled with sand or local fill or something to the end of the driveway.
What's the closest this line gets to the pool house, to the front line?
Probably 85 feet,
So
maybe?
it's pretty cool. Yeah. 85 straight board.
The heritage line, is that behind the pool house?
Yes.
So some of it's going
So
through
natural heritage, yeah, it's on this side. So the system is within natural heritage, and we filed with them, but I don't believe we got a response yet. But it's 2,000 square feet of disturbance in undisturbed area. There's obviously other disturbance, but it's already pre-disturbed. And the lot itself is almost.
So this is one of the cases where they file with natural heritage separately outside of the wetlands process, because they're filing essentially against the local regulations for this filing. So
So we're voting on the local, I mean,
So-
we don't have to wait for
we
them.
have to wait for heritage. Any questions? So Jeff, you have a recommendation on this one?
Yes, I recommend that this could also be, we recommend a -3.
I'll make that motion. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, so the amended orders are continued. So we're going to minor modifications, Cliff Road, Act Realty Trust, 96 Cliff Road.
Sure. Are you looking for it for the subject tag information?
Yeah. Thank you for the record. Paul Santos representing the owner.
Information. I will send you a packet.
Much Stephen L. Cohen, trustee of Cliff ACK Realty Trust. This is simply an addition to the file of the final detailed landscape plan for the property, which we have an order of conditions for. This plan sets forth, if you remember, we came in and had some discussions about the large tree removal over on Cliff Road. And this plan incorporates we came in originally with 2 replacement specimen trees, and the minor mod specified 3, and those 3 are on this, shown on this plan, and then the supplemental landscape plan is submitted there too. So this will be the 3 locations of the 3 specimen trees based on the original minor mod filing, and that's essentially, yeah, it's basically inserting into the file a more detailed landscape plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Three trees. Originally, I think we showed 2, one maybe here, one over here. We've added the 3rd one, you know, in on the backside. What's that?
What's that?
That's good. Yeah.
Yes.
Good thing. Any questions? Questions from the public? No? Seeing none. Jeff, your recommendation?
I recommend this with the original scope of work be a modification.
Make that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Second. Third.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Pass unanimously. Thank you. Huh?
Is your mic in here?
Okay, certificates of compliance. Men's Family Trust, 8 Ames Avenue.
All right. This was for a house renovation. Was done here. Out adjacent to Hither Creek, it's the one that's right before you go across Millie's Bridge on the left. The house was renovated with the new stone path and the new gravel parking area. That has been completed. They don't have any outstanding monitoring or anything that they had to do. And I would recommend KDP issue the certificate of compliance.
Second? All in favor? Any opposed? Very good. Passes unanimously. Callahan, 4 Morgan Square.
This is also, this was the construction of a new deck. And a gate for a pool fence out on 4 Morgan Square. It is also work that has been completed. They have no outstanding reports or any issues. And I would also recommend that this could receive a certificate of compliance.
So moved. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Orders of conditions.
Let me hand out some drafts. Put them on my computer too, so I have to slum it. All right, let's take one and pass it.
Okay, so the first one is Sunset House, LLC.
So just to recap really quickly, Sunset House was the one that was the application for the installation of some core logs on top of an existing bulkhead. It had come in, we had had it for quite a while. There originally was a timber extension and then the design was changed. So just to kind of run through them really quickly, one of our standard ones, and then a photograph requirement for the dune grass essentially. 20 is a maintenance and nourishment requirement. There's not a really significant amount that's there, and it's technically within the buffer zone of the coastal bank because it's behind the coastal bank. And then 21, 22, and 23 are the required conditions from natural heritage as it relates to the possibility of the presence of plovers and terns.
Thoughts?
Just trying to remember back what natural heritage had said. It was mostly about the shorebirds, right?
Yeah, it was essentially a time of year restriction,
Yeah.
so they don't disturb plovers, and then a requirement to monitor their site for plovers. And then anytime they are trying to extend or modify, that they have to file that information with natural heritage to review and comment on them as well.
Who's responsible for making sure they do that monitoring for the plovers? Is that your job, or?
Mine and natural heritage is yes.
Well, you're
They
a lot
pass it off to
closer.
me because
Yeah,
they
you're a lot-
require us to put it in the order. But, yes, but they also require, because it gets added into their list of sites that they have, so the folks that monitor their shorebird monitoring send out nasty reminders that, you know, you haven't logged into their system or you haven't checked in or what's going on. They follow up to some degree as well. So I get them, and I file my reports every year, and I still get the, you know, the reminders that we need to be doing things.
Mhm.
They haunt me.
Did we require a specific amount of sand to be added, or just to replace anything washed away?
It's to just replace the template that was proposed, because it's not a sediment contributing bank right now.
Well, it must have been contributing some, or it wouldn't have been eroding up there.
Yeah, it contributes out to that western side.
A fairly small amount, but,
Which is good.
covered?
I
Yeah,
think
just
so,
keep
yeah.
it the contour
Yeah.
consistent. That would be enough.
That seems like that would kind of cover it up there. Seems like that sort of capture. So put it on 44? Can you put it on 44?
You can put it wherever you want.
It says the 4 logs, tubes, or whatever they're called, shall remain covered with sand.
Sure.
Replace any sand lost or something.
So something that would read, core logs shall be required to be covered with sand. If sand is lost, it is to be replaced within X amount of days. I don't know if they're out there. 14 days, gives them 2 weeks.
And revegetated? Because they are gonna vegetate this with dune grass, aren't they? Sort of make a bank like.
He was talking seasonal, they were doing
Seasonal.
seasonal vegetation.
Are these the
They've done
things
it
that
once.
grow out of?
No, these are just, if you want to ask the clear, these are just the regular core logs with the dune grass plantings on them.
Yeah, not the like inoculated.
Chia pets.
So 24 read, core logs shall be covered by sand. If sand is lost, the cover shall be replaced within 14 days.
Okay.
Move the issue as amended.
We have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And that one passes unanimously. Very good. We can get that one off.
It is SC 48, 29, 24. We are now up to the 2960s.
Okay, so we're down to Holland Junior, 66 Westchester.
All right, so this is the one we closed tonight. It's not in your packet because I wasn't sure what was going on. I did do a draft of it, but if you guys want to discuss it first, you can. Or I can distribute the draft and you guys can go from there. But I think it may be good to take kind of a general sense of where it's going before drafts come out. Thanks.
Yeah, I am totally uncomfortable with a direct discharge from a pipe without road contributions and a true DPW maintenance plan, et cetera.
Yeah, I think it would be DPW and sheep's clearing.
I guess the thing about a DPW plan, we're putting on an order of conditions to this property. How can they enforce DPW? I mean, it's a different organization. I understand your point, but I think they can't go out to DPW and say, "Oh, you got this, you got to do it," and they're going to go, if they want. I mean, if they want to.
So then they should agree to a maintenance schedule that they're gonna monitor and do all those things.
I think, I mean, on their manhole, I think yes, but I think on the town, I think again, this is a weird project in that they're solving a town problem on their property.
But we don't have the town to even give their perspective on this.
Well,
There's a little blurb
there was
from
a note
Cara.
from Cara.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a strange way of putting an undue burden on the property owners to make sure the town does the work. So, I don't know how to do that.
I know, it was mentioned that they did say they didn't necessarily have to do this.
No, but I think
Because they're putting, right, because the pipe goes through where they need to construct things.
Well, it looks
so-
like it goes kind of around and into the neighbor's area.
Yeah.
I think the big problem is they probably can't get to their driveway.
But it's not the most attractive looking thing in your yard. Yeah, I'm not crazy about this one. But I don't see the town fixing the problems, that whole road in that
You
area.
have to put in a pump system of some sort, you know?
Yeah, that's years.
Right, or
Right.
vegetate
Sediment is just
properly
going
so
down
that
into
we're
the bed.
not increasing the area's inability to already infiltrate water, i.e. putting a pool where water would maybe be potentially infiltrating in other cases or flowing across the yard. So, that's me.
Well, how do we feel about the pool?
I don't know, it's outside the 50, and it is.
It's almost outside the 100. I don't like the discharge change.
No, I think they need. I think we should.
Yeah, I think
require
that's
that to be
a
pumped.
classic.
I
That-
pump outside. I like
And then
Yeah,
drained.
I think
and-
that's a pump out project for sure. Typical women in this area have done that before.
You know, there was some talk about the depth to groundwater waiver. What are they proposing? How deep the pool? Is it gonna?
Well, I think it's gonna be up below groundwater.
You're right.
Right,
But
that was the waiver.
at a certain depth of deep end, maybe. Mentioned.
Not too deep.
Is that gonna have a meaningful? If we were to change that, or change the depth of the pool, would that meaningfully change the water flow absorption rates of property?
I don't think it's going to be a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, I'm not.
I don't think we can do
surprised.
that.
Yeah, it's minimal.
So, maybe no pool might, you have more surface area that could absorb potential, but I don't think the depth of the pool is gonna change things.
No, I personally have no problem with the depth of the pool. I'm sure there's an issue there.
I don't think so. I know this whole area's got percolation problems. I
Right.
mean, and I guess that's just an issue that this area has, and
Right.
I don't know what.
Generally, then, property owners would be trying to infiltrate on site and manage their water flow properly. So, i.e. not maybe putting a pool where water would infiltrate or need to infiltrate when we have flooding problems. You know, it's kind of a push it further away, pipe it away, don't look at it, instead of actually tackling the problem, which I know is multiple homeowners on the street, but we don't even know, I don't know, the amount of stormwater that's regularly contributing to this site. We don't have those calculations.
I suspect every drain on that street goes into the wetland. Yeah.
Right.
Sooner or later.
And I don't think the pool area is going to affect any potential redesign of the water coming off the street. I don't think. I mean, I think they've proven pretty well that it's a great issue.
And again, I think, this design should limit the amount of sediment that's getting into the wetland, because they are going to have a trap for it. So I think that's an improvement, and, I mean, the water will get there faster, but I'm a little confused about why is it a problem to get water to a wetland?
Well, let's say it's salting the street.
Well, that's a problem, yeah.
Right. And any motor oil, gas, any roadway contaminants.
I mean,
Nitrous
just-
oxides coming out of the gas tanks, falling onto the street.
I think that's pretty minimal with modern vehicles, but I think just generally sediment is.
Landscaping
clearly-
trucks aren't modern vehicles, and they're parked all over this street all the time.
Well,
I haven't.
So,
when you think of
But
the
I mean,
blowers they use.
we always have tried, obviously, to have some form of
Well, that's generally on the
regulation for
ground.
anything coming
It's
off
not on here.
the wetland.
Right.
Well, kind of slight.
Can I ask a question about this? Because I'm just trying to think of points or findings that I either need to alter or change. So the drain that's there right now collects the road runoff into the same basin and then goes.
Yeah.
And sits there for a longer time than the water that would be, in theory, going from this new one.
Right.
So are we concerned that the new one, because the flow is increased from the road, that it's going to be picking up more from the road, or less because it's not going to be sitting there longer? I just want to make sure I'm understanding this
still-
correctly.
Driving
It's
through that
still the
water, you're
same
washing off all the
area
oil off the
draining.
bottom of your car right into
So-
that water.
Yeah.
So maybe it's worse
It
than
might
that
actually
water
be.
right there.
I know.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly what the issue is.
I don't think we have any scientific
I don't think we have the
basis.
data. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
we have an 8-inch pipe
No, I
that
think
zigzagged
we're-
around a yard installed,
It's gonna get it 'cause it's
who
gonna
knows
sit through
when.
basins. It's-
That was
stuff's gonna
plugged.
settle.
Since that drain pipe was put in, we've cleared the lot across the street, we've paved the road, so we've increased development on this street that would be contributing to that original drainage pipe that was debatably functioning anyway. And now we're gonna have a direct shot with a 12-inch pipe, again, not knowing the drainage area that size, that will directly go there. So, I mean, I don't know, it's still gonna take whatever was sitting on the road with the runoff. I mean, it's non-point source pollution. It's hard to quantify.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're actually making the situation worse with a new pipe. I think the situation is not good to start with. That's personally.
Right.
I think potentially it could be better with the extra basin, with the basins.
With the basins,
With
yeah.
the silt
Yeah.
basins.
Yeah.
I think it's an improvement myself. I mean, I know there's problems, but there's a huge problem there now. You got a
Right.
pipe dumping right into the wetland.
That's what I mean.
And
The
it's,
problem exists. We're not
Yeah, the
making
problem
it any worse.
exists, yeah. I don't think it's gonna make it worse. I think anything that's there is gonna get to the, I mean, if it flows overland, if it's still flowing overland to get there, it's gonna get there. I mean, maybe some of it percolates down, but if it's raining and it's gonna be saturated soil, a lot of it's probably not gonna perk after a fairly short while.
So how do you keep the DPW on top of it? That's the major question.
So is it,
Unanswerable.
Is that?
yeah, and I
everybody
just
in that
wonder,
area?
I mean, I'm sure the
can,
neighborhood's gonna.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding everyone's concern.
I
I'm
mean,
sure the whole neighborhood will.
does a
fall once it's
direct
flooded.
discharge
That
pipe like
street,
this
so
need to be
you open that
permitted
squeaky
differently?
wheel.
In what aspect? I mean, you're still applying the same performance standards that are in
Right,
the,
for a, I don't know, for a direct discharge pipe, you're looking at more of a point source.
well,
that you
you
need
still
to-
need to weigh out the impacts that are going on.
Right.
I mean, it's still I understand the difference between point source and non-point source and the influences that they're having. But the analysis that you're doing is still, does the project as proposed have an adverse impact to the resource area and the interest that it protects? And in the case if you're doing a replacement, whether it's a septic replacement, a drainage replacement, any replacements, does the project that's being proposed, does it alter that impact in a positive or negative way, is the analysis that I think would be prudent against the act, to say, it's worse, it's better. These are the impacts that we would anticipate. These aren't, because you're looking at, and you're still looking for a justification on a waiver for what's there.
On another point, we didn't do much discussion on the cutting into the wetland on that project. That was one of the,
Not wait.
the mowing, and if there, are we gonna have any type of requirement there on replanting or any thoughts on that?
Well, I think also Bruce said that there'd been excessive cutting.
Yeah, there was.
Jason's property.
It was right down.
And they didn't really propose a plan for monitoring the planting just in the face of treating knotweed and replanting. Usually it's a staged process for
Right.
ultimate success.
Well, yeah, usually they don't, usually, they remove the knotweed by clipping it so the soil stays stabilized, but this
Well, we
one,
could
they.
condition it.
Well, there was talk about, instead of, they were talking about mechanical grubbing at first. And it was recommended that it should get chemical treatment.
They should probably plant grass in there and then individually treat knotweed stems with a with a broadleaf herbicide. Would be my recommendation.
Yeah, but how far does that go down? How far are they grubbing into or how far are they treating into the wetland? Because I think there was a fair amount of work within.
It's definitely in the 25.
Yeah, but even further than that, I thought. No, Jeff, remember?
That could certainly look.
In which case, what do you might remove it, you might treat it. I think that it can be sort of maybe a twofold condition where the stuff within the BVW gets treated and monitored and retreated. Some of the other areas maybe can be planted with the grass species that they're talking about, and then treated with probably herbicide. And it's a selective herbicide, maybe. I don't know.
The trouble with knotweed is if you're gonna dig it out, you've gotta go at least 2 feet down, at least 2 feet down. It's terrible. And then you've got a huge disposal problem because you leave the rhizomes and stuff in the soil. You gotta do something with that.
And the neighbors are into it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think it's successful. Nobody gets all of it. I mean, you can hardly get it all.
You can't.
And then the disposal problem spreads it all over the island.
Well, it's one of those unfortunate things. Chemicals are the best for it.
Yeah.
That's the only realistic way to go.
So condition that.
I would condition the use of triclopyr and the BBW, and then outside of it,
Be approved for wetland use.
Yeah. Is there a triclopyr that's more?
Yeah, what is it called?
surfactant?
Aquamaster or something?
Yeah, there's an
There
aquatic
is one.
version of triclopyr.
And then on the grass side, maybe they could go with more of
With rodeo.
well, just another go with rodeo if they're planting grass species that they want to establish.
Oh,
It's gonna
yeah.
have to be like
Unless they clip and drip individual stems.
It's already clipped.
It'll come back. It's going to be coming back, right? It's probably already coming out right now.
It's more than clipped. I mean,
Sure, it's
they
coming back
destroyed
right
the
now.
soil.
Okay.
So maybe can we put in a selective herbicide for grass, the grass, because they're talking about revegetating. The proposal is to revegetate part of this with a grassland species, right?
Yes.
So that should be a selective herbicide,
A broadleaf.
a broadleaf selective herbicide in grassland, and then more of a continued clip and drip in the wetland.
Well, if they clip and drip the whole thing, they could use about anything. But if they're going to spray or something, then they should use a broadleaf specific. But I wouldn't recommend spraying that close to the wetland.
No, because we have no control over how it might be done.
Either hand wipe individual plants or clip and drip.
A certified applicator.
Yeah, those are pretty
Standard.
standard conditions.
Yeah.
Those kind of projects.
Okay.
Questions? So I'm getting kind of a general feel for a positive order with that stuff in there.
I think so.
All right.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
It's
Well,
not-
I'll put that
It
together.
might not be unanimous, but I think it was.
Yeah, understandably. To be sure, it's not
a great project.
It's not a great solution.
All right.
It's not a solution.
I don't think there is a solution.
All right.
That's for sure. Okay.
Moving on.
Okay.
Didn't you?
The best. Batiste. And Alexandria.
I couldn't think of any conditions for that. That was way outside of 50.
Yeah, that was just.
All right. Just as a heads up, I may have to disappear for 2 minutes to run downstairs in a minute. So.
Are we on C Street, is that where we're at?
No, we're on 10 Alexandria.
So it's the second one.
That's, Silver or Batista?
That was Batiste.
Yeah.
It was the house outside of 50 feet.
Yeah, there's like a lumber pile or something.
Yeah.
Move to approve this draft.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Here's something. I'm sorry.
Lucas.
Yeah, Lucas, I was just looking back at the beginning for a second. Lucas, 147 Wellway Road.
Yeah, this is kind of our standard order for septic system replacements up in that area, so there's no fertilizer or irrigation over that area, and then that they just provide us copies of their testing that they have to do.
Should they provide us like photos that it's revegetated? It's revegetating
Sure.
above this part.
We can do a 21. Photographs provided for 3 years. Demonstrating the condition of the revegetated areas.
Move to approve as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously.
You can skip Bellevue.
Thank you. Now, Nantucket C Street.
I'll be honest, for the next two projects, I couldn't really think of any conditions for the two town projects.
Well, under the circumstances, move to approve as quickly as possible.
Before everyone.
Do we have a second on this? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously.
All right, Wamas Goods looks just the same.
Okay, move to approve as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously.
If you guys get the extension.
Thank you.
Where, that's the last one.
That's the last one.
I'm gonna run downstairs, but you guys can handle the rest.
Right. You coming back?
Good luck, Dave.
Yeah, I'll be back.
Yeah.
But you guys are good for
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Glad you're taking care of them. All right, anytime anyone wants to come visit, stop down. Yeah, wait, yeah. We'll come down and have dinner.
Is
We'll come
Cook's
down after
Cafe
you fix
open?
those pipes.
You could do it.
Whatever the extension is.
Take care, thanks.
Thank you. Everybody's bailing out on us here, Jack.
Yep.
So in the process of doing the, cleaning up my landscaping, I realized the order expires in like another month or so. So they about probably 2 months till the project's done, so I asked for a 1-year extension.
I'd like to make that motion.
So moved.
To extend the
Permit for
permit.
1 more year.
Yeah.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Other business, approval of minutes. Anyone like the minutes? Great.
Another good job.
Approve those beautiful minutes by unanimous consent. Enforcement actions we don't know about.
This
here
is-
what's
this is
happening
from
with that-
96.
With the,
Yeah, so that was for the one.
the rock filled.
Yeah.
Oh,
no,
no,
that
that
one,
one, yeah.
Man, that was like.
What the?
Huh?
What the?
Keeps it fun.
Man, that was something.
Okay, report, CBC.
Nothing to report.
NBEC, well, there was one little item, I don't usually get much for us, but, and this is probably not even that too involving with us, but the police department gave us a, in the end of our packet, we had a letter from the police department, and they're starting this, they're requesting the planning board to consider, this, what do they call it, community crime prevention through environmental design, and have one of the officers be trained in it, and involves using natural strategies, relying on elements such as lighting and sight lines and landscaping. And the discussion sort of went, although it wasn't presented, it was just the members of the board discussing the concerns that may happen, what they'd be thinking about, maybe, opening up, especially the line of sight idea. They sort of want to they don't want places where crime can occur, say, and the bike path sort of came up in the conversation, and maybe opening up the bike paths a little bit more in those, say, the ones going up to Pulpus that are kind of through the woods and such. So I don't know how much this would involve us down the road, but it may be an issue with plantings and, and
Yeah,
how much
I mean,
they want to
they've
open
done
up.
that, they did that on the Old South Road, which I think it makes some sense, because people do walk there, and
It
there's
is a
crossroads
big-
and
it is a
views.
big improvement.
You can be suicide as well.
But there are certain areas in the island where, you don't want to give just a, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Go for it, because there are certain areas where, nothing's going on poles like that at night.
Right.
And we have rare species, and other
Yeah.
communities are trying to roadside plant pollinator plants, and we're
Yeah.
going literally mowing it down without looking at species.
Right.
I think
I would say that's a
one of the
very-
issues is, came up with BPAC, is Cow Pond Path there. That's going to Sparks Avenue from First Way.
Oh, yeah.
They mowed that.
Right, but it turns out that there have been 2 assaults on students there in the last year. And so the conversation came up whether or not it really should be lit and widened. So that would be an example of a report where you've actually had physical assaults on female students.
Yeah.
So that I think would make sense, obviously.
Is that a true path then?
No.
If it's a cut through, then
Is that the
you
one
need
that
to
comes
cut it
up in
off and say
Cummings?
you can't cut through there anymore.
Well, I think you won't be
Is
able
that
to
the one that
stop
comes up
people
in
from coming through.
Cummings?
And
I think it more comes up
Yeah,
right
they're
across
coming
from
through
JP
everywhere anyway.
Yeah.
gas station. Comes through.
There's a lot going on
Yeah,
back
did
there.
you, are you talking about to the east side of the cemetery?
how he wanted to have it
There's
widened.
a path
To
that
the east
goes-
side of the cemetery there?
They already mowed all that.
That's where you're
When
talking
I
about, though,
drove
right?
here
Where that
today,
path comes out on
they
the
got
east
rid
side
of
of
all
the
that brush
cemetery?
recently.
Right, like down
Yeah,
by the
then they
gas
put down
station.
Act
They
back.
did that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That was.
that's interesting. Yeah, it looks like they've done some.
They did
They
it.
did it. Yeah, but lighting it up.
Like, I think it takes more community investment and community involvement to report things that are happening. Lighting it up isn't going to do much.
Well, the bottom line is that the person I spoke to on the school board hadn't been told about the assaults. So I found that disconcerting.
They can't, because these people are underage, so teachers aren't even told about that sort of thing.
You don't have, you can be told, you just
Without a
don't
name.
use the names, and so you could certainly be told. And I think I was disturbed to hear about this, that, so little seemed to be done about it. And in fact, it was discussed with someone within the school system who didn't want anything to be done there. And so that I found even more surprising.
Well,
Anyway.
I mean, to make them up and down
Yeah, I
the road on
think-
something, so. Do you have any other items here for Dave? You're still dead?
Yeah, I think there's a meeting coming up tomorrow. I just can't go about that. I think we start officially, in April.
Slow down. Commissioner comments?
Good job. Well, no, quite decidedly, because I actually asked Jeff to send out that email with the link to the Mashpee case. I don't know if any of you ended up reading about it. And, Barry Fogel brought it up. And so there's a movement afoot to change the 78 Wetlands Protection Act. So basically, it would appear to gut it. So that basically, and I think I would like us to write a formal letter to our state representatives saying that we oppose this. And is that something that we could? I asked Jeff to put it on the agenda so that we could actually vote on it. And the article is pretty disconcerting. I really recommend reading it. I mean, it's only
interesting.
a 3-minute, 5-minute article. So is that something that we could table to write a letter about?
Yeah, we should put it on the agenda and
Okay.
put it on the agenda.
Right.
We're in front of a friendly state. I think the state itself is going to sort of.
Well, apparently,
another one.
well, already according to the article, and Fogel seemed worried about it. He said that there are a number of state senators who want to allow hard armoring to protect properties. So that's the rub. That there's going to be more pressure about the 78 Act as more and more homeowners want to protect their properties.
Right.
So and from our point of view, certainly from my point of view, my brief is to protect the natural environment rather than to protect the property owners, or to try and find a balance.
Sandy showed that hard armoring isn't end all be all. I mean, it got just tons of damage to neighboring properties or behind it, and all kinds of stuff.
Right, but apparently there is a movement afoot to allow hard armoring under the Wetlands Protection
On anybody's
78
property.
Act. Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
So that's something that I think I'd like us to address in the most effective way we could.
Was this discussed at the annual meeting or anything? Do you know? In Worcester?
I didn't go this year. Did you go?
I skimmed the article, but this probably is in relation to protecting places like Boston, where you're going to need to hard armor large areas to protect major towns, cities, and then let other areas go. So New York City's looking at plans like that, and of course, we see hard armoring and current structures that weren't pre-78, and they're probably looking forward as to how to do that.
And you probably know this, but I was reading something today that by law in Holland, right? I think there's, by law, you have to there's a beach nourishment component. By law, you have to, and for every property, ocean, it is by law that you have to. Because it really, I mean, Southern California is disappearing.
Right.
And they're citing some cases in Holland.
Well, Holland, a lot of that's below sea level, isn't it? So you have to go and
It's gone.
you gotta flood everybody.
But I think that, we're sort of we're getting there. We're getting there.
They're actually, I think,
not be below sea level, but I think it's, like, I was a little blindsided by the, when,
Barry Fogel?
yeah, who it was he was representing.
Right.
What was the name of the gentleman he was representing?
14 farther away.
14 farther away.
I forgot his name.
Thompson.
And I think, we made a big deal about, getting this guy, giving him the business, but really, it was sort of vague what he was kind of supposed to be doing with his property.
Right, but he didn't, I mean, when I went back home and Googled what he was referring to about in Mashpee, this dynamic going on, so that was what I'd like us to.
The takeaway?
Yeah, well, in terms of tabling it for maybe a formal motion and requesting Jeff to write a letter on our behalf to the State House or whatever.
Well, we just need some clear and defined language in these permits going forward. What is expected? What is the what's the trigger? How often? You have in his case, right? He basically let that thing sit for a whole year. Oh, it was sort of like I didn't want to, spend money on replenishing the sand there, because I knew it was going to just get washed away, I mean, he's just as much
You
as
said
said
you
that.
want to
And he said,
revegetate it because it was just going to go away.
and you say, well, that's kind of the whole point, right?
You live by the revetment, you die by the revetment. I mean, it really is the case.
Anyway, I just thought it was like,
Yeah.
but, it wasn't as refined when that permit was issued as it maybe is now. And I
Well, that
still
was the
don't
tough
know.
permit.
That was a big tough one, because you were saying it was next to.
There's salt marsh on the beach.
Yeah.
And so we were in this balancing act of, replacing sand, but if you start to bury that salt marsh, then you've got to back off on the sand. So we tried to make it flexible to protect that salt marsh. And, it's an unusual situation to have that beach grass growing. There must be little seeps down there or something, of fresh water.
Well, anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
No.
Well,
Maybe it has some more important.
I don't, do we have to wait for Jeff? I think we do.
I guess
We could,
Move to adjourn?
talk about it next week.
I'll say next time.